Was I expelled from Hogwarts? Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in the saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction. So please don't attempt real magic, the results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 76 Newt Scamander. The journey to Albania was largely uneventful. Aside from the first night when a female ghost entered Ralph's room, the second day when the express train was forced to stop for 4 hours on the European plains due to heavy snow, and the disturbance caused by a herd of divine horses while crossing the Pyrenees, overall, it was mostly peaceful. On the evening of the third day, Ralph finally arrived at his destination. Carrying his small black suitcase, he strode off the train, turned, and smiled, saying, "All right, Mr. Weasley, you don't need to see me off anymore. Be careful, son," Mrs. Weasley cautioned. "Yes, I will. Thank you for your care these past few days," Ralph smiled. "When you reach Romania, please give my regards to Charlie." This trip was indeed the most comfortable he had ever had. Someone helped with cooking, someone protected him, and when he had nothing to do, there was a little girl he could tease as much as he wanted. The express train started moving again. Ginny leaned out the window and called out, "Rover, don't forget to send me a Christmas present." Rover waved and watched everyone leave. The express train roared through the wizarding village, kicking up dust, and leaves swirled on the tracks behind them. The boy was at a very dilapidated platform. To his left lay the vast forests of Albania, and to his right, a wizarding village. Newt was in the forest. Not many passengers disembarked, and Rover easily spotted the ghostly Lady Grey not far away. She really was persistent. Ever since that night, she had often followed Rover, even sneaking into the carriage at night and staring at him. The boy was helpless. After all, his magic couldn't work on ghosts. Ralph walked over, his face full of helplessness, and sighed, "Ms. Grey, how can I stop following me? I really don't smell like your mother. If you really like my scent, I can give you my original clothes, and you can smell them every day. I didn't come here with you. I was going to get off here anyway." Ms. Grey was silent for a moment, then said in a low voice, "In fact, I come every year, and I've been doing this for centuries." The woman gazed into the depths of the forest, her heart filled with complex emotions. She sighed softly and said sadly, "I was murdered in this forest on Christmas Day, coming back to visit your own grave." Huh? Just then, a group of wizards walked out of a tavern in the village, led by a short wizard. Ms. Grey probably didn't want to see other strangers. She walked slowly, brushing past Ralph, and drifted into the Albanian forest. "Mr. Scamander, I am a wizard from the Albanian Ministry of Magic. Do you remember me?" the short wizard said warmly. "I invited Mr. Scamander to Albania, I remember, Mr. Red. Is it a routine check according to the secrecy law?" "I know that well." Rove proactively handed over the box. He found that good magizoologists were all knowledgeable about the law. After all, they were often subjected to endless scrutiny, and long-term experience had made them experts. "No," Red waved his hand, somewhat embarrassed. "I came to see you today to discuss something." "What?" Rove asked in confusion. "The mass animal deaths in the Albanian forests have disappeared. We are very grateful for Mr. Scamander's help and will offer a generous reward," Red pleaded, "but could you please persuade your grandfather to return to Romania or England?" Just then, a roar echoed from the depths of the forest. Rove looked up and saw a 6 or 7 meter long fire dragon flying from the depths of the forest. It was a Romanian longhorn dragon with blackish-green scales and 2 shimmering golden horns. Hanging from 2 golden horns were an oil lamp and a somewhat worn box. An old man with gray hair sat cross-legged on the dragon's head, using the light to hold a book in one hand and turn the pages with the other. He turned the pages extremely slowly, and the dragon beneath him flew with remarkable stability, almost without any swaying. The dragon flew from the depths of the forest toward the platform, finally crashing to the ground with a thunderous roar, kicking up countless specks of dust. All the Albanian wizards retreated in fear. The old man, who had been quietly reading atop the dragon's head, stood up, dusted off his thick overcoat, and was about to jump down when he was horrified to find the platform filled with wizards. His eyes, hidden beneath his bangs, darted away, and he immediately changed his mind. He slid down from the dragon's neck and hid behind its back. "You should all go back now, Mr. Red," Rove said. "I'll persuade my grandfather to leave soon." After the Albanian wizards left, Rove walked towards the fire dragon, patted its scales, and laughed. "Did you steal someone's sheep? Sheep thief? Otherwise, why are people so afraid of you?" The black dragon hissed disdainfully, exhaling wisps of white smoke from its mouth and nostrils. It spread its broad wings and slapped the ground. Newt peeked out like a Viet Cong soldier, and only after the wizards had left did he breathe a sigh of relief and say, "No, I've been keeping Waggle under control lately." "Then why does the Albanian Ministry of Magic want you back in Romania?" Ralph looked up at the sprightly yet withdrawn old man and asked softly, "Grandpa, did the magical creatures in your box escape again and attack their Ministry of Magic?" "Of course not," Nit quickly denied, plopping down on the dragon. "Ralph, they're not afraid of me, but of Waggle and the creatures in my box." The old man's voice was deep. "Even if they're not dangerous, even if I can control them, those wizards will still be afraid. It's like walking through a bustling city with a lion. Even if you've tamed the lion and it won't attack muggles, the muggles will still instinctively be afraid." Out of the corner of his eye, Ralph spotted a niffler stealthily emerging from Newt's box and landing on the ground. He lifted it by its legs, suspending it upside down in midair. "Let's go back then," Ralph said, climbing onto the black dragon's wings. He sat down beside Newt and whispered, "What's that guy who killed the animals doing here if he's not in the forest?" The boy turned, staring into Newt's eyes. "Did you find something else?" This time, Newt's gaze didn't waver, nor did he rush to speak. Instead, he looked up into the distance, his gaze finally settling on the boy, and nodded. "I found an old friend deep in the forest. Could it be a witch?" Ralph raised an eyebrow. Newt exhaled softly, his expression sorrowful. "It is indeed a witch. I haven't seen her for decades. I want to take her home." "Who?" "Nagini. Thanks to Just Love to Wonder and Add and Subtract for their generous donations." Chapter 77 Stay away from Dumbledore, start with Scamander. Newt desperately wanted to take Nagini away from Albania. But rationally speaking, Ralph didn't think it was a wise choice. As a blood-cursed orc, Nagini, due to a maternal blood curse, had transformed from a witch into a serpent, and this process was irreversible. She was no longer the person she once was. Voldemort also had an extraordinary fondness for Nagini, even planning to create her into a Horcrux, demonstrating an almost perverse affection, far exceeding that of the so-called Death Eaters. When Voldemort returned to Albania and discovered his little darling was missing, his first suspect would undoubtedly be Newt. After all, he had spent over half a year in the forest. But then again, if one day your friend became a beast and was lured by a villain, and you had the opportunity to take her away, would you stand idly by? At least Newt wouldn't. Whether or not Voldemort would target her was also outside Newt's considerations. Everyone has faced the Dark Lord before, don't underestimate the Dark Lord. Therefore, Ralph had no reason or standing to stop Newt. He even had to help Newt steal Hogwarts and get rid of Tom's beloved pet Nagini while Voldemort was still at Hogwarts. Wasn't this a form of NTR? A black Romanian horned dragon, like a dark cloud, flew over the forest, finally hovering above a bunker. Besides poverty and backwardness, Albania's most famous features were probably its numerous bunkers scattered throughout the country. Haka, the first secretary who led the country for nearly 40 years, was one of the few men who could simultaneously offend both the Eastern and Western blocs, as well as Third World countries. Vowing to be an enemy of the whole world, Haka built over 700,000 bunkers, spread across every corner of the country, to increase strategic depth. Newt had been living in one of these bunkers for the past 6 months. After dismounting from the Romanian horned dragon, the two entered the bunker for a tour. Ralph found the bunker surprisingly sturdy, even containing some weapons left behind by muggles. The boy quickly began to recount his experiences on his travels, especially about the ghost, Lady Grey. Ms. Grey is actually Helena Ravenclaw, Ravenclaw's daughter. Many ghosts in the castle and the headmaster's portrait know this, and Professor Dumbledore knows it too, Nit whispered. So when she said the scent of her mother, she was referring to Ravenclaw. You have something of Ravenclaw on you, could it be this? Ralph thought for a moment, then took a book from his black leather trunk. He opened the book, revealing the bookworm. After much thought, the only thing on him that could possibly be connected to Ravenclaw was this bookworm he caught on the library. The earliest books in the library came from Ravenclaw's private collection, And this 900-year-old bookworm had always been kept in the library, and it just so happened to have an owner. Newt took the silverfish with 9 tentacles, gently stroking it with his aged hand, and couldn't help but smile. The one from the Hogwarts library? I saw it when I was a child. When I caught the silverfish, I heard a witch's voice, Ralph recalled. But only I could hear it, no one else could. That's not uncommon. Perhaps someone left magic on the silverfish, which would be triggered when it was caught. Newt pondered, then looked at the boy and said softly, "Did you tell anyone about this?" "Only Hermione, Sherry, and Neville." "Who went to the library with me?" "No, don't let any more wizards know about this. Silverfish are rare, and they're very expensive on the black market," the old man said slowly. "A silverfish over 900 years old like this is extremely rare. Only an ancient magic school like Hogwarts can nurture one. Even Nicholas Flamel's private library only has one silverfish over 400 years old. I've seen one, but it's nothing compared to this one." Nico Flamel, the old man nodded slightly, stepped over the threshold, walked down the steps, and headed towards the living room he had renovated. He sat down in a chair and said, "As for whether it was left by Ravenclaw, I think you can ask Ms. Grey. She's Ravenclaw's daughter, and since she's been bothering you, she'll definitely be willing to tell you." Ralph nodded and sat down in the chair as well. "By the way, your grandmother came here with Margaery a while ago?" Ralph looked nervous. "She didn't mention me, did she?" "Margaery brought you a Christmas present, and she wants you to open it quickly." Newt took a package from the table and handed it to the boy. "I won't open it, I'll leave it." Ralph shook his head frantically. This crazy woman always tricked him with her gifts. The year before last, she gave him a huge dung bomb that exploded as soon as he opened it. The year before that, it was a Playboy magazine, which she made him open in front of everyone, almost causing him social death. Last year, it was a dress she wanted him to wear. Ralph wouldn't be surprised if Margaery brought him a corpse one day. "Your grandma left you a letter." Newt pulled a letter from his pocket. Ralph opened it and read it carefully. "What did Tina say?" Newt asked curiously. "She was disappointed that I didn't go to Ivermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, as expected." Newt smiled. "But I'm happy that Tina doesn't know how excellent Professor Dumbledore is. He can teach you a lot. And one more thing, about you." Ralph raised an eyebrow. "Grandma told me to be careful of Professor Dumbledore's sweet talk, and not to be fooled by him like you are." "Ralph, I think Tina might have always been prejudiced against Albus." "Right," Newt whispered in defense. "But I think Grandma is right." Ralph grinned and said, "This Christmas, if it weren't for Professor Dumbledore, you would definitely be with Grandma, not in this bunker deep in the forest." One can only say, stay away from Dumbledore-style scams, starting at Scamander, Hogsmeade Village, Hogshead Tavern. In his second-floor room, Dumbledore stood before a portrait, sneezing several times. The girl in the portrait smiled playfully at the old man. "Ariana once said that sneezing means someone is talking badly about you behind your back," Dumbledore said softly, gazing at the portrait. "She often sneezed on purpose, then accused me of talking about her behind her back and preventing me from reading." Aberforth, cooking, was annoyed by his brother's incessant chatter, which sounded like a nagging old hag. He retorted rudely, "If sneezing means being scolded, then you must be sneezing all the time. The people who scold you could probably line up from Hogwarts to Albania." "I scold you often too." The last sentence was spoken softly, but Albus Dumbledore still heard it. "Sorry, Aberforth, I just meant to say that Ariana likes me the most, but I was a little slow on the uptake. She likes me the most." "Not you." Aberforth slammed the cleaver on the table, annoyed. "And why are you talking so much nonsense today? Are you like this at school all the time? Minerva has such a terrible temper. How could she stand you? Did she secretly cast a curse on you to shut you up?" Before the old man could speak, Aberforth added, "Don't mind me, I'm just a straightforward person." Dumbledore fell silent this time. Aberforth seemed to realize he had gone too far, and decided to treat his brother well as a Christmas present. He poured all the vinegar he had bought from the Hufflepuff wizard into the pot, scooped up the thick, dark stew with a spoon, and put it in a bowl. Aberforth placed the greasy bowl on the table and said rudely, "Eat up, there's more if you're not full. Come and eat." Fawkes. Aberforth gently prepared another dish for Fawkes. Fawkes' food looked and smelled more like normal food, while Dumbledore's bowl resembled the silt beneath the Black Lake. Yet Albus Dumbledore ate slowly and with relish, as if it were a rare delicacy. "By the way, there's something I need to tell you," Aberforth suddenly said. Your foolish caretaker Hagrid, last night in my bar, got drunk by some strange wizard, and then played Gwent with him. Oh, Professor Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. Hagrid lost badly. No, Aberforth sneered. Drunk Hagrid won a dragon egg. I understand. The old man was calm, gazing out the window, a gentle breeze ruffling his white beard. Tom, you're still the same as always playing silly little tricks. Chapter 78 Christmas Gifts. Christmas was approaching, and Ralph was woken up early in the morning. He opened his eyes to find delivery driver Fawkes standing by his bed, gently pecking at his fur. Hey, not there. Fawkes, shut up, don't. Ralph quickly pulled a blanket over himself, covering himself completely. He was only 11 years old and didn't want to experience being skinned alive so early. Fawkes was indeed furious. He had found a pile of things next to his nest early in the morning, assuming they were all gifts for him. Only after Dumbledore's reminder did Fawkes realize that none of them were gifts for him, they were all meant for Ralph. If he hadn't received any gifts, Fawkes wouldn't have cared, but suddenly receiving so many gifts, sharing the joy with his sorting hat, only to find they weren't for him. Fawkes's feelings were unimaginable. Don't be angry, didn't I send you a gift? Ralph wrapped himself in the blanket, only his eyes showing. It was the little nest he had carefully chosen, even the dazzling birds were envious. Mentioning this only fueled Fawkes's rage. A second-hand nest used by the pheasants? It was a noble phoenix. Another fierce onslaught ensued. Helpless, Ralph signed an unequal treaty, promising free food but refusing to pluck Fawkes's phoenix tail feathers. Only then did Fawkes finally calm down, transforming into a ball of fire to go find Newt. Ralph, wrapped in his blanket like a caterpillar, jumped out of bed and began examining the Christmas presents Fawkes had brought. Besides some chocolates, many were books on veterinary medicine. Hogwarts students knew Ralph ran Celia's magical creatures shop, so his gifts were usually quite practical. However, several witches had given him books on gynecology, which put Ralph in a difficult position. He was a veterinarian, how did he become so successful in the field of gynecology? Hagrid's gift was a large bag of herbs. Ralph liked this kind of simple and unpretentious approach. He gave Hagrid a dragon egg, but it was unfertilized and wouldn't hatch into a dragon. It would taste good as a boiled egg, though. Professor McGonagall gave Ralph a Quidditch manual. Ralph reciprocated with a tiny flying broomstick, specially designed for animals. When McGonagall transforms into a tabby cat, she can ride the broomstick and play Quidditch in the room. Ralph also gave Professor Snape a bottle of Potter shampoo, although the patent for Potter shampoo had long been sold by Flynn Potter and had nothing to do with Harry. But the brand remained the same, and it still had the familiar smell and formula. Professor Snape reciprocated with a bottle of Hogwarts fresh air, showing his thoughtfulness. Dumbledore also gave him a gift, a string of magical wind chimes that could predict the weather. Ralph gave the headmaster a dozen thick wool socks, enough for him to use until next Christmas. As for his sister Margaret's gift, this time it was surprisingly normal, a precious two-way mirror, but unfortunately, there was only one side, the other was probably with Margaret. Neville gave a flying broomstick repair kit, which included a bottle of Fleetwood handle cleaner, a silver broomstick trimmer, and a brass clip-on compass. Hermione gave a first aid kit for emergency treatment of wounds caused by magical creatures. She also thoughtfully gave small toys to the Botricles and Witchbirds. Opening Sherry's gift, Ralph found a sweater, seemingly hand-knitted by the girl, with a Hufflepuff badger on the front and a beautiful Ravenclaw eagle on the back. Inside the room, Neville lifted the covers, got out of bed, and crouched in a corner, checking his Christmas presents. Ralph, feeling a bit cold, burrowed back into the covers. Neville opened a small bag full of seeds of magical plants Ralph had given him. He was happy, gazing out the window, wondering where to plant them. Early in the morning, Hermione sat at her desk, humming an English tune, happily writing something with a bright red, flame-like quill pen. The girl gazed at the quill pen, made of phoenix feathers, with obvious delight. In Hogsmeade, Shirley arrived at Professor McGonagall's house as promised. Standing at the table, she placed 2 or 3 sprigs of daffodils she had picked in a vase filled with water. Shirley was dressed lightly, but not cold, because underneath her robes was a suit made of unicorn fur. The girl had washed the suit early and returned it to Ralph, who then gave it to her as a Christmas present. It was very warm. For some reason, Shirley thought of Ralph, far away in Albania. If she wasn't there, she wondered how the animals in the box were doing. Professor McGonagall, carrying a small flying broomstick, approached. She had just finished test flying it in her room. The broomstick performed quite well. Professor McGonagall, noticing the somewhat absent-minded Sherry, gently tapped the girl's forehead and smiled faintly, thinking about whom. The girl with the ponytail blushed, feeling a little guilty. Ralph stood outside the bunker, building a snow dragon, modeled after the Romanian longhorn dragon, Vagel. However, his technique wasn't very good. It looked more like a chick than a fire-breathing dragon. Ralph was somewhat dissatisfied with his creation and, adhering to high standards, was about to tear it down and start over when he turned his head and saw that persistent figure again. Lady Grey, or rather, Helena Ravenclaw, was floating under an old locust tree, staring blankly at him, seemingly sensing her mother's presence. Ralph crouched down, pinched a snowball between his two fingers, gently rolled it, and tossed it towards the tree. The snow scattered and fell like a shower of petals. He greeted her politely, saying perfunctorily, "Merry Christmas, Ms. Grey. I forgot to prepare a present for you." "I'll do it next time." Ms. Grey looked at the boy and suddenly said, "Would you like to see the place where I was killed?" Ralph wanted to refuse, but remembering Newt's words, he needed to ask about the silverfish, so he cleared his throat and said, "If it's convenient." Ms. Grey floated away into the distance. Ralph wanted to ask if he should help earn some paper money, but considering that wizards didn't have this custom, he gave up. He took out his flying broom and followed Ms. Grey, flying deeper into the forest. Ralph flew for a full 20 minutes before stopping in an open area, where there was only a towering tree, long since dead. "I was stabbed to death here." Ms. Grey suddenly lifted her cloak, revealing a large expanse of her hidden chest, with a black wound on it. Ralph squinted, admiring, examining the wound-up clothes. This wound was indeed very vicious, thanks to the generous donors, 2021030110648207612 inches, Edelweiss, and for their generous donations. Chapter 79 Scamander, I will marry you. The wound is about 2 inches long, pierced through by a short sword. The blade seems to have been imbued with dark magic, as the wound has a faint black sheen. Ralph, seemingly caught up in his veterinarian's professional instincts, closely examined the wound on Lady Grey's chest. Lady Grey didn't cover her chest, allowing the boy to observe her. Her voice was slightly cold as she said, "Want to know who killed me?" Ralph, of course, knew who did it, but still feigned interest, nodding. "Of course, Lady Grey, my real name is Helena Ravenclaw, the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw." Helena observed the boy, noticing his expression remained almost unchanged. It seemed he already knew her identity. "Years ago, I took something very important from my mother, and then I fled Hogwarts, hiding in the Albanian forest, not wanting her to find me." Helena stood under the hollow tree, her voice mournful. "Later, my mother fell ill, very ill. She desperately wanted to see me one last time, so she sent Barrow, a wizard from Slytherin, to find me. No offense intended, but I still want to ask, Madam." Ralph crossed his fingers in front of his abdomen and gently patted the back of his hands. "Since you ran away, how did you know your mother, Ravenclaw, was seriously ill?" "When Barrow found me, he told me about it." Helena sighed. "So, it was Barrow who told you he was sent by Ravenclaw to find you, right?" Helena nodded slightly. Ralph raised an eyebrow and said slowly, "There's something I don't quite understand. Why did Ravenclaw send a Slytherin wizard to find you? What about the Ravenclaw students?" "Barrow is a very persistent and stubborn wizard. My mother probably knew that he wouldn't give up easily until he found me," Helena stammered. "That's just your personal guess, isn't it?" The woman nodded silently. "Later, Barrow found the forest where I was hiding, and I refused to go back with him." Helena took a deep breath and said painfully, "Barrow is a wizard with a terrible temper. When he heard that I didn't want to go back, he flew into a rage. Plus, he had loved me for a long time, but I rejected him, and he hated my rejection." Barrow couldn't control his emotions. "That day, he completely lost control, drew his sword, and killed me." Helena put her long robe back on, covering her chest. Ralph clasped his hands together, fingertips pointing upwards, and rested them on his chin. After a moment's thought, he narrowed his eyes and asked, "After you returned to Hogwarts as a ghost, did you see your mother, Ravenclaw?" "No." Helena's eyes were somewhat dazed and blank, as if she wanted to cry. "When I returned, my mother had already passed away, and the cause of death, Professor Hufflepuff told me that my mother died of illness, but..." Helena hesitated. Ralph raised an eyebrow and said softly, "And other wizards told you that Ravenclaw didn't die of illness?" Helena's lips moved slightly, her voice trembling. "Someone said that my mother was killed by another wizard in a fight." "Who said that, Professor Binns?" Helena's voice was so soft that Ralph had to stand next to her to hear her. The woman looked confused. She guessed, but Professor Binns didn't know who my mother fought either. "I think it might have been Gryffindor." "Who?" Ralph was completely stunned. "Not long after my mother died, Gryffindor disappeared." Helena recalled events from 1,000 years ago, suddenly raising her voice indignantly. "Gryffindor also loved my mother, but was rejected. He was probably like Barrow the Blood, wanting to destroy what he couldn't have." "Men are all the same, Helena, can we stick to the facts and not generalize?" Ralph was somewhat speechless. He hadn't expected that this Lady Grey, even in death, was still proficient in boxing. "Where did Slytherin go?" "I noticed you haven't mentioned him," Ralph asked curiously. "Professor Slytherin had already left Hogwarts a long time ago." Helena shook her head. "The four founders established Hogwarts together. The first few years were fine, but gradually their teaching philosophies diverged. Professor Slytherin wanted Hogwarts to be more selective in its student admissions, ideally limiting itself to pure-blood families." Helena gazed into the distance, her voice ethereal. "He didn't want to accept Muggle-born children, believing that in the event of a war with Muggles, they wouldn't support wizards and were unreliable. But the other three didn't agree with his teaching philosophy. Then, the rift between him and the other three widened, and he eventually left the school." Helena paused for a moment, her voice lowering. "However, there have always been rumors that before leaving the school, Slytherin left behind a secret room for his successor to purge Muggle students. Since then, I've never seen Professor Slytherin again, not even after my mother's death. When Gryffindor disappeared, he never returned." Ralph sat on his flying broomstick, instinctively grabbing a handful of snowflakes. He made a snowball, pondered for a long time, and then took the silverfish out of his pocket. "Have you seen this before?" Helena stared intently at the silverfish, unable to suppress her excitement any longer. Her voice trembled as she said, "This is a silverfish born from my mother's spellbook." "No wonder you have my mother's aura on you." Ralph narrowed his eyes. Could the mysterious witch's voice really have come from Ravenclaw? Ralph Scamander. Helena's eyes were as red as jewels, seemingly burning. She stared at the boy and said, "You are the person I've been searching for in the prophecy." "What prophecy?" Ralph leaned back slightly, looking at Helena. "I once received a prophecy from Cassandra Trelawney," Helena said urgently. "Trelawney? What is her relationship with Professor Sybil Trelawney of the divination class?" Ralph asked sharply. "Sybil Trelawney is Cassandra Trelawney's great-great-granddaughter," Helena said excitedly. "Sybil is just a fraud, but her ancestor Cassandra is not. She was a true prophet with a second vision, and Cassandra's prophecies are never false." "Cassandra's prophecy mentioned me." Ralph found it increasingly intriguing. Helena nodded. "Cassandra prophesied that I would be resurrected by a wizard imbued with my mother's powerful aura." Helena sighed, gazing intently at the handsome young man before her. She had once believed Tom Riddle was the prophesied child she had been waiting for. He was so charming and eloquent. Helena had even guided Tom to Albania to find the crown she had hidden, hoping to imbue him with her mother's essence. But Helena hadn't expected to be deceived. After graduating, Tom took the crown and never returned to see her. Helena had thought she would never have a chance to be resurrected, but then she discovered Rolf. She was certain he was the wizard Cassandra had prophesied, the one she had waited for nearly 1,000 years. Rolf Scamander. "If you would resurrect me," Helena took a breath, speaking earnestly, "I will marry you. I am the daughter of Ravenclaw, of the noblest blood, and I have inherited my mother's beauty. No witch is more beautiful than me. We will have a child, inheriting both the great names of Ravenclaw and Scamander. When my mother died, she left me a fortune, enough for you to squander for a lifetime. It's all yours. I also know the whereabouts of the Ravenclaw tiara. I took it and hid it. You can have that tiara of wisdom." Helena Ravenclaw seemed insane. She stared at Rolf, her eyes blazing with madness. "If you would resurrect me, you will have everything. Including me." Rolf narrowed his eyes, staring at this Ravenclaw daughter, Mrs. Grey's Christmas present. Interesting. Chapter 80 Capturing Nagini. In the dimly lit room, towering stone pillars carved with pythons supported the dark green ceiling. Dim light cast large shadows on the floor, within which lay two cauldrons. Before them stood a wizard in black robes, brewing a potion. The flames flickered beneath the cauldrons, the potion gradually boiling, adding a touch of warmth to the otherwise chilly room. The potion in the left cauldron was milky white, the elixir of immortality. But it was only a semi-finished product. The most crucial element, the Philosopher's Stone, was needed to complete the brewing. Once the Philosopher's Stone was obtained and added to the cauldron, Voldemort could drink the elixir and be resurrected, gaining a complete body. This was what he had dreamed of for 10 years. The potion in the right cauldron resembled a viscous slurry, slowly bubbling. It was already brewed, but to be used, some small items needed to be added. Get the thing from Snape as soon as possible, Quirrell. Voldemort's voice was chilling. Yes, Master, Quirrell said humbly, kneeling on the ground. Come, let's go see our friend who is hibernating, Voldemort said. Quirrell stood up and walked deeper into the room. He was both excited and afraid, never expecting to see the legendary Chamber of Secrets. This was the room Slytherin left for his successor. Slowly reaching the depths of the Chamber of Secrets, a towering statue appeared, reaching to the ceiling. The statue had a huge face, an old, monkey-like face, a sparse, long beard that almost reached the hem of his stone-carved wizard's robes, and two large, gray feet standing on the smooth floor of the room. Speak to me, Slytherin, the greatest of the four great masters of Hogwarts, Voldemort hissed in parsley. Slytherin's huge stone face moved, its mouth opening wider and wider until it formed a huge black hole. Quirrell climbed the statue and entered the dark hole, where a room with walls adorned with emeralds provided a faint light. By this light, a hibernating basilisk could be seen, coiled in a corner, struggling slightly as if awakened by a wizard. Voldemort gazed at the basilisk. They hadn't seen each other for almost half a century. Years ago, 16-year-old Tom Slytherin had come here and was disappointed to find only a basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets. But as they talked, Tom discovered more secrets. Slytherin had taught the basilisk a great deal of dark magic so that it could be passed down to future generations. Tom learned more of Slytherin's dark magic from the basilisk than he had learned from stealing from the forbidden areas of the library. It was under Slytherin's guidance that Tom entered the vast realm of dark magic. It was also through the basilisk that Voldemort first learned about Horcruxes and how to make them. Otherwise, how could he, at only 16 years old, have conceived of immortality? Voldemort stroked the basilisk, his weathered, noseless face filled with reminiscence. Once I'm resurrected, I'll take you away from here. You'll like Nagini, his cold voice echoed in the secret chamber. Deep in the Albanian forest, the entire forest was covered in snow, but here lay a hot spring, its boiling water steaming and wisps of smoke rising. Rolf followed Newt to the hot spring, reaching out to touch the water. The temperature was just right, perfect for a soak. Nagini is hiding in a cave near the hot spring. The temperature in this area is very high. So she doesn't need to hibernate and can still be active, Nit whispered. Then how do we find her? Nit opened his worn-out trunk, and quickly emerged a creature covered in snow-white fur, over 5 meters tall. It was a snowman. It placed its arm on Ralph's shoulder, and the boy's shoulders were immediately covered in snowflakes. Newt gently brushed them away, instructing him, I'll have action summon snow to cool this land. Nagini will feel the cold and run away, but she must have dug many exits, Nit said seriously. You'll patrol the sky on your flying broomstick, and signal if you spot her. Ralph nodded and flew into the sky on his broomstick. As the snowman roared, a howling wind suddenly swept by, causing the snowflakes that had been falling softly just miles away to drift towards them. Ralph flew in midair, reaching out to catch the cool snowflakes, quickly filling a handful. A giant snake, over 3 meters long, emerged from a hidden cave entrance. Nagini was preparing to move to another cave. This place was no longer safe. Rolf's gaze fell on the ground as if searching for a golden thief. He suddenly stopped and whispered, Found it. Aiding sounded in the boy's mind. Detected one domesticated blood-cursed beastman, Nagini. Side quest triggered. Capture Nagini. Reward, snake language. Master snake language, can communicate freely with them. After giving the signal, Rolf rode his flying broomstick, swooping down like a falcon towards Nagini. That was snake language. Rolf, who had initially been reluctant to capture Nagini, suddenly became eager. Hearing the whooshing sound, Nagini raised her head, her dark, vertical pupils fixed on the boy, flicking her tongue repeatedly, thick saliva dripping down. When the boy approached, Nagini suddenly straightened up, opening her blood-red maw to bite Rolf, but the boy nimbly dodged. Nagini arched her body, her tail suddenly lashing out, but the lightning-fast sweep still missed the suddenly accelerating flying broom. Nagini was furious, but her speed simply couldn't keep up with the agile boy. Ralph, riding his flying broom, was like a slippery eel, constantly harassing Nagini. He scattered seeds of the devil's net, which landed on the ground. Devil's net, entangling roots, the black seeds landed, and vines burst forth from the soil, like fishermen casting nets, countless vines flying out to entangle Nagini. Nagini burrowed back into the hole, but Ralph flicked his wrist, an underground root spread, binding the giant snake and pulling her out of the hole. Ralph twisted his wrist again, slamming her hard into the ground. Bound by vines and roots, Nagini began to struggle violently. She opened her mouth wide, biting at the vines, and a ball of fire shaped like a salamander fell from the sky, striking the snake's head and exploding. Ralph flew over Nagini on his broomstick. Gazing at the bound but still struggling creature, a daring idea suddenly flashed through his mind. He wanted to try out the magical tongue whip from the toad wraith. The boy licked his lips, thought for a moment, and then gave up. It didn't suit his fighting style, and besides, he'd save it for dealing with witches. Nagini, that snake, was out of the question, thanks to Lucer and Jess Love to Wonder for their generous donations. Chapter 81 Quirrell's Return. P.S. The plot at the end of the last chapter received negative feedback from readers. Although I'm a struggling author, I'm still a decent person, as you can tell from my usual writing. So I've revised it and will try to avoid plots that make readers uncomfortable in the future. This is my fault. Grinning face. With Ralph and Newt's combined efforts, capturing a snake woman named Nagini wasn't difficult. Ralph successfully acquired the Parseltongue talent, but when he tried to have a deeper conversation with Nagini, she ignored him. Ralph was curious about how Voldemort had brainwashed Nagini to make her so loyal. With such abilities, what magical creature couldn't she tame? Since he couldn't win Nagini's heart, Ralph had to force her. He made her bite a stick every day to collect precious snake venom. Nagini's snake venom was an excellent magical material, whether for concocting toxins or using in medicine. Now that they had captured Nagini, Nit decided to take her back to the Romanian Dragon Sanctuary. The Albanian Ministry of Magic was overjoyed, practically kneeling in defiance outside the fortress. After all, the dragons flew overhead every day, and they were terrified. Red also paid Newt a hefty sum. He had approved an even larger amount from the ministry, but a 70-30 split was perfectly reasonable. Ralph also received a thank you payment. Red was convinced the boy had persuaded Newt to leave, otherwise Newt would never have gone. Ralph told Red that since the Albanian Ministry of Magic had let them leave, it meant the matter was settled, completely resolved. If problems arose in the forest again, it wouldn't be their responsibility. If they wanted them back, it would cost more, a lot more. Ralph was doing this to prevent potential future disputes, since in a few months, Voldemort, unable to steal the Philosopher's Stone, would have to return to the Albanian forest. Red readily agreed. He just wanted Scamander to leave. He believed the forest had returned to peace, and he would never ask Scamander for help again. As his holiday drew to a close, Ralph boarded the Orient Express and returned to England. This time he didn't encounter the Wheeleyes, but Lady Grey was still pestering him, as if she had him cornered. Ralph didn't have a good way to resist. After all, you can't kill a ghost that's already dead. As for resurrecting Helena, if Ralph had that ability, why would he need to go to school? He'd be wandering the world with his staff, ruling the wizarding world like a madman. Ralph had never heard of magic that could resurrect ghosts. Voldemort did indeed resurrect, but Tom had his reasons. He had several Horcruxes, he could roam freely without dying. Helena, you've been dead for almost 1,000 years as a ghost. What right do you have to talk about resurrection? Through his conversation with Helena, Ralph also became interested in the secrets of the era of the four great wizards, Slytherin's departure, Gryffinder's disappearance, and Ravenclaw's seemingly mysterious death. The voice of that mysterious witch intrigued him even more. Unfortunately, Helena didn't know much either. It seemed he could only ask Professor Binns for more details. Back at Platform 9, Ralph, Hermione, and Neville met up and boarded the express again, heading to Hogwarts. Sitting in the carriage, Neville asked, "Rover, did you receive my gifts in Albania?" "Yes," Rover nodded. "A very useful flying broomstick repair kit. And Hermione's first aid kit." "I used it too." Hermione was reading, taking notes with a bright red quill pen. She looked up anxiously. "Are you hurt?" "No, I injured a snake while catching it," Rover explained. "Did you like the gifts I gave you?" "I loved them." Hermione held up the quill pen, her face beaming with undisguised joy. Neville was also pleased, grinning. "I cleared a plot of land in my grandmother's greenhouse and planted those herb seeds." Ralph smiled. "I'm glad you like them." Hermione blinked, then suddenly asked, "Ralph, do you remember what I asked you to do?" The boy looked confused. "What?" Hermione puffed out her cheeks. "You promised to get me an autograph, Mr. Newt Scamander's autograph." Seeing Ralph's astonished expression, Hermione narrowed her eyes. "You haven't forgotten, have you?" "Of course I remember." Ralph seemed a little embarrassed, scratching his head and forcing a smile. "I put the book in a box. There's a lot of stuff. I'll get it for you later." The girl glanced at him suspiciously, blinking. "No, I'm afraid you'll just write your own name on it later." Ralph twitched his lips, looking aggrieved. "Hermione, do I look like the kind of person who would do something like that?" "Trust me, I'll give you the book tomorrow. It'll definitely have my grandfather's autograph." "It's not just that you look like someone, it's that kind of person," Hermione said firmly. "You must have forgotten to ask for an autograph and were thinking of writing one for me yourself. Then what if I take the book out now and it's already signed?" Ralph seemed to be trying to appear calm, his smile somewhat forced. "Want to bet?" Hermione hesitated. She stared into the boy's eyes, crossed her arms, and snorted, bragging. "Fine, I'll bet. 2 galleons. Come on." Ralph remained seated, refusing to move. Only after Hermione's urging did he sigh, take the black leather case from the shelf, and the boy turned the knob to open the case, picking up a copy of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Hermione snatched the book from Ralph's hands, quickly flipping to the title page. There, written in quill pen, were 2 different names, Newt Scamander and Ralph Scamander. Hermione rolled her eyes at Ralph, pressed the book to her chest, and whispered, "I thought you forgot to get it for me." "Didn't I say I didn't need your autograph? Why did you stubbornly write it on?" "Mind your own business." Ralph habitually grinned, revealing his bright, even teeth. He leaned back in his chair and chuckled. "You lost 2 galleons to me again. Hurry up and pay up." The girl puffed out her cheeks angrily, finally huffing, "I'll win it back someday." "Hermione, my grandma says gambling is bad, so I advise you to give it up," Neville whispered. "You can't beat Ralph. You'll never win in this lifetime. Don't end up losing it all yourself." Upon arriving at Hogsmeade Station, the tall Hagrid, carrying an oil lamp, waited for the first-year students in the cold wind. He clapped his hands and said, "All right, everyone, follow me." The first-year wizards still had to enter the castle from the Black Lake tonight, unlike the older students who could take a carriage. The ice on the Black Lake hadn't melted yet, so the magical boats couldn't pass, and the students had to walk across the thick ice. Ralph, Hermione, and Neville cautiously hid in the crowd, afraid that a mermaid might suddenly appear and claim they had knocked it unconscious. Fortunately, the ice had sealed off the Black Lake, and no mermaids were seen. After entering the Great Hall, Ralph waved towards the Ravenclaw table and then walked with Neville towards the Hufflepuff table. On the first night of school, everyone saw Professor Quirrell again. Professor Quirrell's injuries seemed to have almost healed, but he was extremely thin, with a yellowish complexion, as if he were malnourished. He was still wearing a scarf, sitting next to Professor Snape, like a wronged little wife. At Professor Dumbledore's signal, everyone applauded, welcoming Quirrell's return. Professor Snape, however, kept his eyes fixed on Quirrell, a cold smile playing on his lips. That was his defense against the Dark Arts Post, his. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 The Attack Begins. After the Christmas holidays, the new semester began. Hufflepuff House, currently ranked number 1 in the house rankings, was hit hard on the very first day. "Miss Abbott, you forgot your holiday homework? Go back to your dorm and get it now, I'll wait for you." "Oh, you forgot it at home." Professor McGonagall seemed prepared, pulling out an owl and placing it on Hannah's desk. "Now send a letter home and have them send your homework over." Professor McGonagall's practiced, almost heartbreakingly rapid speech shut down all excuses. "Don't tell me you don't have anyone at home, or that you had the homework in some very secret place and they can't find it. If they can't find it, it means you didn't do it." Hannah was dejected. Why couldn't the reasons she'd thought of for days work? Professor McGonagall pursed her lips and walked towards the next victim. She raised an eyebrow and said, "Miss Bournes, did you forget your homework at home too?" Susan Bournes, seeing Hannah's expression, was terrified. She had no choice but to honestly admit, "I forgot to do it." "Why didn't you forget to eat?" Professor McGonagall said sternly. "Did you do your homework for the other subjects?" "Yes." "Oh, so you forgot my transfiguration homework?" "Right." Professor McGonagall raised an eyebrow. "Miss Bournes, you don't need to learn transfiguration anymore." "No, Professor McGonagall." Susan's voice trembled slightly. "Next time, you can forget to do your homework for the other subjects, but not transfiguration," Professor McGonagall said sternly. "Rewrite it now, and you won't eat until you finish. Hurry up." Susan looked utterly dejected. Professor McGonagall walked over to Neville, who was blushing and looking miserable. "Professor McGonagall, I also forgot to bring it, but I don't know if I left it at home or in my dormitory." Neville didn't even remember if he had done it or not. "Your grandmother sent your homework directly to me, Longbottom." Professor McGonagall glanced at him and said, "She seems to think it's safer that way." Neville sighed and wiped the sweat from his brow. Just then, Justin and Macmillan arrived, standing in the doorway and hurriedly saying, "Sorry, Professor, it was normal for them to be late. They had been working on their homework until the wee hours of the morning and were exhausted, but at least they had finished." Professor McGonagall took the homework from them before allowing them to enter. Almost all the Ravenclaw students had turned in their homework, except for the Hufflepuff students. A quarter said they forgot to bring it, a quarter had it stolen on the train, and a quarter forgot to do it. It can only be said that there is no harm without comparison, so the Hufflepuffs lost several dozen points in just one class. After class, Ralph didn't leave the classroom immediately but instead took Professor McGonagall's old textbook and asked some questions. Sherry could answer his transfiguration questions, but the handwriting was difficult to decipher due to its age, so he had to ask Professor McGonagall. Hannah, Susan, and a group of Hufflepuff students were still finishing their homework, their eyes filled with tears as they looked at Ralph, seemingly hoping he would save them. Ralph was helpless. After leaving the classroom, he saw a girl with a ponytail standing in the hallway, holding books in her arms, leaning against the wall, gazing at the distant scenery. Students kept passing by, secretly observing this Ravenclaw beauty. Seeing the boy leave the classroom, Shirley walked over and walked beside him, asking softly, "Ralph, did you receive my Christmas present?" "Yes, I did." Seeing no one around, Ralph gently lifted his robe, revealing a sweater underneath. "It fits quite well. I knitted it for you according to the size of that unicorn fur garment." Shirley breathed a sigh of relief, her eyelashes trembling slightly. "This is the first time I've made clothes for someone else. I used to only make clothes for myself, so my skills aren't very good." "I like it very much." Shirley blushed slightly, blinked, and asked, "How's the unicorn?" "It's almost healed, but it's really heartless. It won't let me touch it now." Ralph was a little angry at the mention of the unicorn. He used to treat it every day, gaining the unicorn's favor, but after Shirley fed it a few times before the holidays, the unicorn became somewhat resistant to him. Shirley swayed her ponytail, smiled, and said, "Looks like we can't do without me. I'd like to ask for a raise, boss, or I'm going on strike." Request rejected. Ralph suppressed a laugh and said seriously, "However, for an assistant as excellent as you, we might consider giving you a year-end bonus." The girl smiled sweetly. As the first week of the new semester began, Hufflepuff, which had been far ahead in house grades, was once again overtaken by Ravenclaw in second place. The Hufflepuff Badgers had lost a lot of points because they hadn't done their holiday homework. This also proved the self-discipline of Hufflepuff students, slacking off at school, slacking off during holidays, slacking off every day. What else could it be but self-discipline? Professor Quirrell also fully demonstrated his slacking off, still having everyone read in the first class. So, the young wizards dryly read how to deal with carve for a whole class, and Quirrell said they would have to recite the text in the next class. If they had to choose between Quirrell and Snape, most students would probably choose the latter. Professor Snape, though known for his sarcasm and irony, was capable of teaching new things in a way that was both painful and pleasurable. The bounty for helping Professor Quirrell remove his scarf so the back of his head can fully enjoy the sunlight continued, even increasing to 100 galleons. Many students suspected that Professor Snape had secretly issued this task to injure Quirrell again so he could continue teaching defense against the dark arts. Snape's motives were indeed strong, especially after Quirrell's return. His temper had worsened, and almost every student had points deducted from their classes. Ralph was deducted 5 points for taking extra herbs from the medicine pantry. Neville was deducted 10 points for mixing up the herbs in a potion. Harry lost the most points. He even rubbed his eyes, losing 20 points for eye strain. Everyone was fed up with the oppressive atmosphere and just wanted to get Quirrell out and bring back the gentle Snape. Besides, there was the 100 galleons bounty. The twin brothers were the first to act. They cast a spell on several snowballs, making them chase Quirrell around and hide him on the back of the head, thanks to Wu Tai, Zingy and Fengxi and a passing old K for their generous donations. Chapter 83 The Secret Under Quirrell's Scarf. Gryffindor, a house renowned for its courage, is far inferior to Hufflepuff in terms of leisure and indifference. Its academic performance can't match Ravenclaw's, and it has fewer pure-blood families than Slytherin. But when it comes to causing trouble, the little lions aren't exaggerating. They claim to be second to none. When trouble comes, they really step up, and they're fearless. Among the many Gryffindor students, the twin brothers reign supreme. So, as one of the 3 scourges of Hogwarts, they naturally fired the first shot in helping Quirrell untie his scarf, enjoy the sunshine, and earn 100 galleons. Besides throwing snowballs, the two also stole Professor Kettleburn's fire crab from the magical creatures class. Fire crabs are magical creatures that resemble turtles, with different colored jewels on their shells. When they sense an attack, they breathe fire from their tails. Feeding the fire crab different things will enchant the flames. Eating garlic gives it a garlicky flavor. Eating chili peppers gives the flames not only a burning sensation, but also the intense pain from the chili peppers. The twin brothers, more imaginative, fed the fire crab a dung egg. During a third-year defense against the dark arts class, while Professor Quirrell turned away, a flame-carrying and extremely foul odor accidentally shot into the air and ignited the scarf on his head. The scarf was of good quality, or perhaps it was enchanted and fireproof, burning only a little, but the deadly aura of the dung egg immediately enveloped Quirrell. Lee Jordan rushed over to put out the fire, grabbing a basin of ice water he had prepared beforehand and pouring it over Professor Quirrell's head. The flames were extinguished instantly, and the ice water seeped into Quirrell's head along with his scarf, causing him to shiver and shudder. Professor Quirrell rushed back to his office and didn't return before the end of Get Out of Class. Compared to the Gryffindor's courage, the Hufflepuff students were much more discreet. They simply took a lot of pumpkins from Professor Sprout's greenhouse and hid them in the defense against the dark arts classroom. When Quirrell stammered as he led the class in reading, the pumpkins would jump onto his head and gently fall back down. Either the back of the head or the pumpkin will break first. The Ravenclaw students were remarkably refined. They simply added a magical fuel to the fireplace, which rapidly raised the classroom temperature when it burned intensely. The students were so hot they stripped off their thick clothes. Quirrell was also drenched in sweat, soaked to the bone, as if he'd just been pulled from the water, but he still wrapped his scarf tightly around his head, afraid of getting heat rash. In contrast, the Slytherin students were far less gentle. To ensure their headmaster's wishes were fulfilled, the Snakes began using the magic Snape had taught them in the defense against the dark arts to deal with Quirrell. Those spells were all aimed at his head. Peeves quickly joined the battle. Unlike other ghosts, Peeves had a physical form. He could fly like a ghost, pick up objects, and even become invisible. Peeves stole Madame Hooch's blink ball and left it in the defense against the dark arts office, constantly using his bat to make the blink ball chase Quirrell. Under such frequent and fierce attacks, Professor Quirrell naturally wanted to retaliate. Showcasing his formidable personal strength and neutralizing each of those clumsy attacks. However, he had always cultivated an image of being a stuttering, harmless idiot. After a semester of timidity, he was seen as a useless piece of trash by everyone. A sudden counterattack now would surely expose his true strength and attract Dumbledore's attention. The Dark Lord had also strictly forbidden Quirrell from intervening, comforting him by saying that once the weather warmed up and the basilisk awoke from hibernation, they could steal the Philosopher's Stone. But this kind of forbearance wasn't a solution. Voldemort had had enough of this endless harassment and attacks. Hiding behind Quirrell's head, he had been beaten more in the past month than in the previous half-century. Did Voldemort have any pride? But he couldn't fight back, and being beaten was unpleasant. After much deliberation, Voldemort decided to leave Quirrell and continue to lurk deep within the castle as a wandering spirit. With Dumbledore at school, if he couldn't afford to provoke these students, couldn't he at least hide? After Voldemort left, Quirrell immediately untied his scarf to prevent further attacks. The students were all greatly disappointed. The head bathed in sunlight was simply a bald head. Nothing else. Inside the black leather case, Ralph sat on a chair not far away, seemingly lost in thought. Shirley noticed something was off with the boy and, understanding, didn't disturb him. She pushed the water cart to water the animals. A ring cow opened its mouth wide at the water cart. Even half a meter away, a jet of water flowed upwards and was sucked into its mouth. Ralph was actually checking the system's rewards. Helped Quirrell remove his thick scarf, allowing his rotting head to fully enjoy the warmth of the sun. Reward: the Dark Lord's original scarf. Quest completed: help Voldemort leave Quirrell's body. Reward: Shapeshifter, able to invade the consciousness and mind of magical creatures and control their behavior. Quest completed: with Quirrell removing his scarf, revealing his bald head, Ralph successfully completed both tasks. The whole process was actually within Ralph's expectations. Voldemort's goal was the elixir of immortality, and he wouldn't do anything that might expose himself before obtaining the Philosopher's Stone. Voldemort's current state was, Tom, you don't want to be discovered by Dumbledore and lose the chance to steal the Philosopher's Stone, do you? Of course, Voldemort didn't want to. He had waited 10 years for Quirrell, and the Philosopher's Stone was hidden in a forbidden area, seemingly within reach. Before stealing the Philosopher's Stone, he would show great restraint. This was probably the most vulnerable and easily bullied stage of Voldemort's life. Even if you insulted him to his face, he would endure it. So, after endless harassment and attacks, Voldemort would only willingly leave Quirrell's body, allowing him to remove his scarf. You want to see? See or fill. Ralph's confidence in scheming against Voldemort stemmed not only from his psychological manipulation but also from Dumbledore. The headmaster hadn't stopped the students' antics, so what was there to fear? As for where Voldemort would hide after leaving Quirrell's body, besides continuing to wander the Forbidden Forest as a ghost, there was a high probability he'd hide in the Chamber of Secrets. That was the only place outside Dumbledore's surveillance at Hogwarts. Ralph rubbed his temples, pondering whether Voldemort would use the basilisk. Because of the butterfly effect, many things had changed, and Voldemort might use this power to ensure he obtained the Philosopher's Stone. After all, the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets was the power Voldemort could most confidently use now. And the basilisk's weakness was too fatal. If this was Voldemort's trump card, he would suffer a crushing defeat. Although it was just speculation, Ralph was still preparing to take some precautions. After all, who could resist an adorable basilisk? Chapter 84 Quirrell, have you always been this brave? Having finalized his plan and found few loopholes, Ralph stopped worrying about Voldemort and the basilisk and began checking the system's rewards. He had successfully obtained the Dark Lord's original scarf. The process was simple. Quirrell untied the scarf and placed it on the podium, where it was then tossed into the trash can by the students like garbage. Ralph glanced at the trash can. The scarf, damaged beyond repair by the students and Peeves, was completely unusable. He had no intention of picking it up, even though it was an original scarf. Fortunately, the system was still somewhat benevolent, providing the magic the Dark Lord used to create the scarf, allowing Ralph to make his own similar scarf in the future. Comparatively, he was now more eager to try the Shapeshifter spell. The effect of Shapeshifter was to invade the consciousness of an animal and control its behavior. The primary difficulty of this spell lay in the invasion. If there was an emotional bond between the Shapeshifter and the animal, the invasion was easier. But without an emotional foundation, being complete strangers, or even hostile, it would encounter strong resistance from the animal spirit. If the invaded magical creature's spiritual power is strong enough, such resistance can even damage the Shapeshifter's soul. Of course, if the Shapeshifter is strong enough, they can enter by force, and the lack of emotional connection doesn't matter, but it's never as easy as having feelings, and it unlocks more positions. Ralph had no such concerns, because he had completely tamed the Bowtrickle, the Witchbird, the Salamander, and an invisible beast, all of which were perfectly compatible with him. Ralph prepared to give it a try. The boy whistled, and a Bowtrickle emerged from the dense forest, hooking onto a branch and swinging in a huge arc through the air like an ape, quickly landing in Ralph's hands. Ralph picked up the Bowtrickle, gently looked into its eyes, and softly said, "Groot, my consciousness will enter your body, please don't resist, relax, just like usual, it won't hurt, okay?" The simple-minded Groot didn't quite understand the boy's meaning, but since it was Ralph's request, it turned its head and nodded shyly. Ralph pulled out a small knife and pricked his finger. Blood rolled down, and the botricle, clutching the boy's finger, blew on it forcefully, seemingly distressed. The first time always involves bleeding, but this time it was Ralph's blood. He chanted a spell, letting the dripping blood soak into the botricle's head, then letting it lick the warm drops. Ralph dripped 3 drops before finally meeting the botricle's gaze. He could feel a slight struggle, but having completely tamed the botricle, that barrier, like a barrier, was instantly pierced. When he opened his eyes again, Ralph's vision was on the botricle, while its original form remained asleep, leaning back in a chair with its eyes closed. The boy controlled the botricle's body. He stood up, but his steps were shaky and unsteady, very uncoordinated. After only a few steps, Ralph stumbled and fell flat on his face. After a while, he was able to walk unsteadily. Although he would fall when running too fast, it was much better now. Ralph became excited. He truly felt like a hunchback protecting a tree, and even the pain from falling felt incredibly real. After circling around, the boy ran towards Sherry. Reaching her, he suddenly exerted his strength, quickened his pace, and leaped, stepping up 7 or 8 times on Sherry's robe before showing any signs of falling. However, Ralph didn't fall. He had already reached out and grabbed Sherry's ponytail. Like a monkey, the boy continued climbing upwards, quickly reaching the girl's shoulder. Ralph sat on Sherry's shoulder, tilting his head back and swaying, watching her feed the colorful fish. It was a very strange feeling. When Sherry stood up, Ralph lost his balance and stumbled, falling towards the pool. The girl suddenly reached out and caught Ralph, who was about to fall into the water. She gently cradled him in her hand and said softly, "You've been drinking fake alcohol, Grote." Shirley looked at the bewildered botricle and found him adorable. She reached out and patted the mischievous creature's head, then smiled brightly and affectionately tapped its head with the tip of her nose. Ralph withdrew from the botricle's control, his consciousness returning to his own body. The boy rubbed his cheeks, suddenly understanding how Professor McGonagall felt when he was petted. This magic, real torture. Night fell. A wretched bird flew out of the Hufflepuff common room. Ralph had become somewhat addicted to shapeshifting, switching between 3 magical creatures in one day. Now it was the wretched bird's turn. However, he also discovered a problem. His consciousness could only remain inside a magical creature for a maximum of half an hour before being forcibly withdrawn. Ralph couldn't control 2 magical creatures simultaneously. This was probably his current limit. But half an hour was enough. Too long or too short was not good. Ralph flew along the corridor, and as he passed the 2nd floor, he saw Filch patrolling, with Lady Loris beside him. Filch also saw the wicked bird overhead, but said nothing, only muttering a few words, seemingly recognizing Ralph's bird. Ralph flew through the castle, intending to see Quirrell, and headed towards the school hospital on the 2nd floor. However, before he even reached the hospital, he heard voices in a corridor. He flew lightly towards them, quietly landing on a towering statue, and then listened intently. No, I don't know why you want to see me here, Severus. What, you want to meet me on the rooftop? Snape stared into Quirrell's eyes. No, with the Dark Lord gone, Quirrell could finally scratch the back of his head to his heart's content. He scratched it a few times and said, "I'm injured, Madame Pomfrey won't let me out for too long." "Then I'll get to the point," Snape interrupted. "Have you figured out how to subdue Hagrid's 3-headed dog, Severus?" "You?" Quirrell looked at Snape in shock. "I don't understand what you're talking about." "Don't understand?" Snape's voice was icy. "Don't you know there's a Philosopher's Stone hidden beneath the Forbidden Zone?" "You're thinking of stealing the Philosopher's Stone," Quirrell stammered. "That wouldn't be good, if Professor Dumbledore finds out." "Stop pretending, Quirrell," Snape said coldly. "I know your purpose. You don't want me to be your enemy, do you?" Ralph stood on his armor, watching the scene below, feeling that Dumbledore had really screwed over Snape. Dumbledore had probably instructed Snape to monitor Quirrell, but he hadn't told him that Voldemort was behind Quirrell, and that the Dark Lord had even been hiding behind Quirrell's head at one point. If Snape had known this, he certainly wouldn't have dared to threaten Quirrell so directly. But that's also part of Professor Snape's skill. After stopping Quirrell from stealing the Philosopher's Stone, he could later persuade Voldemort to trust him. What makes the top-tier spy? Just then, a clattering sound rang out. Someone had accidentally knocked over a suit of armor, which emitted a piercing, chilling scream that shattered the silence of the castle. Ralph turned to look, but saw nothing. It seemed he wasn't the only one eavesdropping, other wizards were nearby. However, those people were either using the disillusionment charm or wearing an invisibility cloak. Snape suddenly turned around and demanded sharply, "Who's there?" But no one answered. Quirrell stared intently at Snape, then suddenly stepped forward and hugged Snape's thin body tightly from behind. In the moonlight, a bald man was embracing a middle-aged man. Tightly. Snape was completely stunned. He roared angrily, "Let go, Quirrell!" Seeing Snape struggling, Quirrell reached out and grabbed his greasy hair again, crying out, "Severus! I didn't do anything. Don't push me any further." Quirrell was thrown back by magic and crashed into the wall. Ralph stood on his armor, looking at the fallen Quirrell, completely stunned. "Quirrell, have you always been this brave?" Thanks to Nightlight Before, Bookworm Shop, and Book Friend 20201212230314275 inches for their generous donations. Chapter 85, The Professor Who Never Washes His Hair Is Afraid of Going Bald? Professor Quirrell was bald, and the news of his hospitalization spread throughout Hogwarts at lightning speed. Many students went to visit him, forming long queues outside the school hospital. Whether out of genuine concern or sheer curiosity, it was unclear. Once it was confirmed that Quirrell was indeed bald, public opinion shifted overnight. Instead of widespread ridicule, he was met with sympathy from many students. "I don't know what's so funny about baldness," said Robert Hilliard, a Ravenclaw student, seriously. "I'm not bald, but I would never laugh at Professor Quirrell." Robert, only a 7th-year student, was the best student in Ravenclaw's class and was reportedly even teaching himself Muggle computer programming, except for his receding hairline. Fred and George, they really made a mistake. They shouldn't have treated a bald teacher like that, Ron criticized the twins at the Gryffindor dining table. Mr. Weasley was bald, and there seemed to be a genetic predisposition to baldness in their family, which made Ron feel quite sorry for Quirrell. "Quirrell just doesn't want everyone to see he's bald. What's wrong with that?" Malfoy, unusually, stood up and sternly refuted Pansy's mockery of Quirrell. Malfoy wasn't speaking up for Quirrell because his mother had taken him to a fortune teller when he was 7, and the old witch had predicted he'd go bald in his 20s. In fact, most British men go bald, even wizards. Even with hair growth spells and potions, you still need hair follicles. If the follicles are dead, baldness is a terminal illness for wizards. Ralph, as a veterinarian, explained the cause of baldness to the young wizards from a professional perspective. "The water in Britain is too hard. When bathing, the chemicals from this water and shampoo clog the pores in the hair, leading to hair loss." Everyone suddenly understood, it was the water. Did that mean not washing your hair could prevent baldness? Could this be why Professor Snape didn't like washing his hair? Was he afraid of going bald? So, during Professor Snape's class, he suddenly noticed a group of students with greasy hair. He deducted 10 points from Harry's grade, the reason being, not washing his hair. The young wizards even held a Snape imitation contest, voting on whose hair was the greasiest. Unfortunately, Professor Snape only came in 2nd place. In potions class, many students also noticed that Professor Snape seemed injured. A clump of his meticulously styled, slick-back hair had been pulled out. Although it was only a clump, it was quite noticeable. Are there any wizards at Hogwarts who dare to fight Professor Snape? Who's so brave? But even braver, someone posted a bounty among the young wizards: help Professor Snape wash his hair, reward 100 galleons. First a bounty on Quirrell, then on Snape, both 100 galleons. Although no one knew who was so rich, many young wizards were excited. Professor Quirrell, once a rising star, quickly faded from popularity, losing his appeal to young wizards, and everyone's attention shifted to Professor Snape. In February, the Quidditch matches began. Professor Quirrell seemed to have heeded Professor Trelawney's advice and hadn't watched a single Quidditch match since his injury. Ralph wasn't worried about being cursed by him again, but even so, he didn't participate, remaining a substitute and waving a towel in the stands. Cedric performed well, catching the Golden Snitch in 2 consecutive matches, helping Hufflepuff House maintain their top position in the Quidditch Cup standings. Slytherin, thanks to their outstanding physical talent, currently held a solid 2nd place, with Gryffindor only slightly ahead of Ravenclaw. Wood had become obsessed. While other teams trained a maximum of twice a week, he trained 3 times a week, plus extra practice on weekends. The biggest benefit was that the twins' pranks were reduced, making Hogwarts much quieter. But it was no use. Gryffindor's Seeker wasn't good enough, and their total score was too far behind the top two, leaving them with only a theoretical chance of winning. Professor McGonagall could only hope to find a good seeker next school year. As for Ravenclaw, the good news was that they were the first team to prepare for the 92-93 season. The bad news was that they had lost all their games so far, and it seemed that victory wouldn't come this year, or even next year. Ralph heard from Sherry that even the bronze door knocker at the entrance to the Ravenclaw common room had been updated with a new question, asking how many consecutive losses the Ravenclaw Quidditch team had suffered. Captain Roger Davis didn't dare go back to the common room all night. Compared to Quidditch matches, Ralph had been busy monitoring Quirrell lately. He often used his shapeshifter to infiltrate the Wicked Bird's body and then flew to the school hospital to see if he would sneak into the Chamber of Secrets. However, Quirrell had always been well behaved. Therefore, to determine whether Voldemort had gone to the Chamber of Secrets, Ralph went alone to Myrtle's girls' restroom after class. Pushing open the bathroom door, a dilapidated room came into view. Beneath a large, stained mirror was a row of stone sinks, their surfaces peeling and covered in moss. The floor was damp, and a few candle stubs burned dimly on their holders, casting a sinister glow. On a bare wall, 7 blood-red words were scrawled, "Terrible. Terrible. Terrible." Ralph stood by the sinks, examining them carefully. On the side of a brass faucet, he found a small snake engraved. This was the entrance to the secret chamber, but Ralph had no intention of using Parseltongue to open the passage. Going down rashly might just lead to Voldemort. He wouldn't go down, but he could ask around. Some people practically lived in the bathroom 24/7. Ralph walked towards a toilet stall. He heard faint noises coming from inside, like someone secretly eating something, and the sound of running water. Ralph knocked on the stall door, and the sound immediately stopped. After a moment, a faint female voice came, "This one's not usable. Find another restroom." Ralph knocked harder on the door, and a short, plump female ghost floated out. Her face was melancholy and gloomy, half hidden by long, straight hair and thick, pearl-colored glasses. Myrtle's originally gloomy face instantly brightened when she saw Ralph. She said with some surprise, "Scamander, what brings you here? I heard from the fat monk that you were sick, so I came to treat you," Ralph said with a smile. "Last time I went to see you, you said you wouldn't treat ghosts," Myrtle said with a straight face. "Back then, my medical skills weren't good enough to cure a ghost's chest pain. I went home for Christmas recently and studied hard with my grandfather," Ralph smiled. "Is it still hurting lately?" "It hurts." Tears streamed down Myrtle's clear eyes. "They all bullied me, especially Peeves," Myrtle said, her voice trembling with tears. "I have feelings too, you know, even though I'm dead. Besides ghosts, have any wizards come here to bother you?" Ralph pressed. "Like sneaking in, which seemed very strange." "Yes, who, you?" Chapter 86 Stealing Your Mother's Grave? "You, a boy, snipped into the girls' restroom and are here to treat someone's chest pain. I think you're the strangest one." Myrtle stared at Rove's handsome face, covered her face, and said shyly, "But I like it." "Myrtle, don't talk nonsense. I really am here to treat you," Rove said seriously. "Besides me, have any other wizards come here recently, especially those who don't look like students? This is very important. Does someone insulting me count?" Myrtle floated in midair, panting. "This has happened several times. Every time I go out of the restroom, I don't see the person who insulted me, and then you leave the restroom to look for the wizard who insulted you." "Yes," Myrtle said with a sob, "my life here has no joy, only sorrow. Now that I'm dead, people still won't leave me alone." "When did this start?" Rove frowned. "During the Christmas holidays, I was taking a bath in the toilet. Cough, I meant suicide," Myrtle said dramatically. "Peeves was always tormenting me, so I came here to kill myself. Then, of course, I remembered I was already dead. And then there was a hoarse voice at the door, calling me Fat Myrtle. Ugly Myrtle." The boy nodded slightly. If he wasn't mistaken, Quirrell had started using this method to lure Myrtle away during the Christmas holidays before sneaking into the Chamber of Secrets. "I understand, Myrtle. Don't tell anyone I'm here, it's our secret," Ralph instructed. "I'll go back and do some more research now. I'll come see you again next time. Goodbye, don't go. Talk to me a little longer." "I haven't talked to a wizard in 6 months, Myrtle said, sounding a little lonely. "I saw you bothering Malfoy yesterday," Ralph said, turning to leave. "I mean, I haven't talked to a wizard as handsome as you." Myrtle chased after him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Scamander, my chest hurts. If only you were a ghost, you could rub it for me." Ralph walked even faster, but at the crossroads, he encountered a witch who was both incredibly familiar and a source of great annoyance for him. "Wow, it's Miss Grey, she's so beautiful." Myrtle floated beside Rove, gazing enviously at the female ghost in the distance. "I wish I were half as pretty as her." Seeing the boy staring at Miss Grey, Myrtle grumbled a warning, "You'd better not try to talk to her. Miss Grey ignores all students, she's very cold." Before Myrtle could finish speaking, Miss Grey floated straight over. The woman, in her eyes, was incredibly beautiful and noble like a princess. Two slender fingers held her skirt. She looked at Rove, her eyes naturally alluring, and said softly, "Rove, what are you doing here? Is there something you need?" Rove brushed past Miss Grey, somewhat impatiently saying, "Didn't I tell you not to look for me at school?" Miss Grey looked at the boy with a resentful expression. Myrtle stared wide-eyed at the two departing figures, her face filled with disbelief. The noble and aloof Lady Grey in her mind was now following closely behind Rolf, even deliberately lagging behind a few steps. Myrtle pinched her cheek hard. This wasn't a dream. She let out a sorrowful sob, rose into the air, turned around, went back to the bathroom, and plunged headfirst into the toilet. She'd been heartbroken again. She couldn't live anymore. Walking slowly down the corridor, Ralph glanced at the silent Madame Grey following behind and said directly, "Helena, I really can't resurrect you. It's not that I don't want to. But I don't have the ability. I'm just an ordinary little wizard, raising a few not too dangerous little animals, an ordinary little wizard, learning wandless spellcasting in first year." Helena said softly, "You know, your plant magic is very similar to Hufflepuff's, but I am ultimately not Hufflepuff." Ralph remained non-committal. "I can wait for you to grow up, I can wait," Helena said earnestly. "I came to find you just to tell you that I know where to find spellbooks, and I can take you to get them to help you grow quickly." "Can they be as many as the books in the Hogwarts library?" Ralph countered. "To be able to learn all the books in the library in one's lifetime is already extraordinary. I don't need your spellbooks, they're different." Helena shook her head. "The most precious books in the library all come from my mother's private collection, tracing back no further than Sumer, Assyria, and ancient Egypt. But before that, there was an even more ancient and brilliant wizarding kingdom." Ralph looked at Helena skeptically. "But Bathilda Baggett's History of Magic takes the Sumerian wizarding kingdom of Eridu as the beginning of wizarding history. Even earlier, Professor Bin said that was just the chaotic Stone Age, after which humans and magical creatures interbred, accidentally acquiring their magical talents, thus creating the earliest wizards." "Of course not. The history of wizards is far longer than you imagine." Helena shook her head. "It's just that some things are too distant, obscure and difficult to understand. Those who know them are unwilling to speak of them, and they aren't written in books, so naturally, few people in later generations know them." "I'd like to hear more," Helena said somewhat embarrassedly. "I'm sorry, I heard all of this from my mother 1,000 years ago. It's too long ago, and I have forgotten it all." "You can forget something so important." Rolf seriously doubted whether Helena was truly Ravenclaw's biological daughter. Otherwise, how could a family renowned for its wisdom, and the most intelligent witch of the era, produce such a stupid daughter? How pathetic must the paternal genes be? "Although I don't remember much, I know that many powerful magical artifacts were left behind by these more ancient wizarding kingdoms," Helena quickly said. "My mother's crown was also a product of those magical techniques. It's not something modern wizards could create." "Where are those books hidden?" Ralph asked. "In my mother's grave." "You mean, we're going to rob your mother's?" Ralph cleared his throat, using a more refined term. "Your mother's grave. It's not tomb raiding, just entering the tomb to inherit some ancient knowledge." Helena clearly also found it a bit far-fetched, but for the sake of resurrection, she didn't care about such things anymore. "I remember hearing Professor Slytherin mention a magical item that could resurrect. Look for it. Maybe the method to make it is in those books." "What's it called?" Ralph asked. "The Resurrection Stone, thanks to starting from white, purple incense burning, and QQ reading reader a salty sheep for their generous donations." Chapter 87 Hagrid's Big Darling. Grave robbing isn't just a moral issue, it's a criminal offense, especially robbing the tomb of Ravenclaw, one of the four elders. As a 1,000-year-old tomb, it's not just a private grave, but a historical artifact. If discovered, it wouldn't be as simple as being expelled from Hogwarts. It would mean being sent to Azkaban for re-education by the Dementors. Ralph didn't even dare to dream of it. What? Ravenclaw's daughter, Helena, invited him in to receive her mother's legacy? That's all right then. Ralph admitted he was genuinely tempted. Leaving aside the ancient spellbooks, the ancient magical techniques for creating crowns were enough to attract him. As for Helena mentioning making the resurrection stone, Ralph could only assume she didn't understand the value of the Deathly Hallows. The only problem was that, with Ralph's current abilities, he didn't think he could enter an ancient tomb filled with magic. Therefore, after several days of excitement, as if he could immediately create a crown, Ralph calmed down. He was only a first-year student. He should do things befitting a first-year student, not try to create a big scandal every now and then. Moreover, when in doubt, consult Newt. Ralph planned to go home and ask him if he had any experience in tomb raiding that he could learn from before deciding whether to go with Helena on this big mission. March arrived, spring returned, and the weather gradually warmed. Outside the castle, the sun shone brightly, and in the distance, a gently sloping hilltop could be seen, its slopes covered in vibrant wildflowers in full bloom. The Black Lake had thawed, and mermaids were sunbathing on its shore every day. They had never surfaced before, which aroused Ralph's suspicion. He controlled the wicked bird to wander around the Black Lake and found the mermaid who had been knocked unconscious on Christmas Eve among the fish. It held a small steel fork, its eyes fixed on the young wizards playing on the shore, seemingly searching for the one who had knocked it unconscious. Although Ralph was itching to fish, he restrained himself and didn't go fishing. This was troublesome. It seemed he would have to find someone to take the blame. Unable to visit the Black Lake, the boy planned to go to the Forbidden Forest again, but this plan was quickly shelved because he received a distress letter. Hagrid invited him to a gathering at the cabin, saying he had an important treasure and wanted Hagrid's help in appraising and guiding him. Ralph knew what the treasure was, so after receiving the letter, he hurriedly took Sherry, Hermione, and Neville to the cabin. On the way, Hermione asked, "Did Hagrid say why he invited us?" "Why the rush? I asked Hagrid to help me find illusion grass seeds in the Forbidden Forest," Neville guessed excitedly. "Could it be that he found them?" "What is illusion grass?" "A very rare plant whose leaves shimmer like copper," Neville explained. "Ancient wizards in some places even use them as currency." Neville, having studied with Professor Sprout in the greenhouse for more than half a year, already knew many obscure plants not in the textbooks, even obscure ones that Hermione didn't know. The little girl immediately took out her notebook and started writing with a quill. "Where phantom-scented grass grows, nifflers usually gather," Rove said softly. "Neville, I think I've seen some in Romania. I'll keep an eye out for them for you during the summer." "Thank you, Rove," Neville nodded vigorously. "But the good stuff Hagrid mentioned isn't phantom-scented grass." Rove, in high spirits, walked with a swagger. He laughed. "It's something else you wouldn't expect, Rove. It's a magical creature, isn't it?" Sherry, who had been silent all along, suddenly asked. "How did you know?" Rove glanced at the girl in surprise. Sherry just smiled gently. She didn't know Hagrid, but she knew Rove. He only showed particular excitement when he saw rare magical creatures, and if these magical creatures were kept by someone else, his excitement would rise another level. Although she didn't know the reason, it was probably just like Rove was now. After crossing the lawn, the four of them arrived at a small wooden cabin on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. In front of the door was a stone bow and a pair of rubber boots. AWW was locked outside and frantically scratching at the door, seemingly because Hagrid was doing something unsavory inside. Seeing the group, AWW rushed over, seemingly wanting to lick their arms. But Ralph, having seen AWW licking Moonfox feces in the Forbidden Forest, immediately stopped it from approaching. Hearing about this past, the group retreated with disgust. AWW felt aggrieved, couldn't it even enjoy the buffet? Ralph knocked on the door, which quickly opened a crack. Hagrid peered through the gap, seemingly very wary. "Come in quickly, are you being followed?" Hagrid was very alert, cautiously glancing around. "No, I'm experienced." Although Ralph had never been to Azkaban, he had learned counter-surveillance skills from Newt, all learned through the old man's bloody lessons. Hermione and the others were completely bewildered. Anyone who didn't know better would think they were conducting an illegal transaction. Ralph entered the room and looked around. He found all the curtains drawn tightly shut, and a roaring fire blazing in the fireplace, making the cabin unbearably hot. Hagrid told Tooth to stay at the door and then closed it again. He made tea, served rock cakes, and told everyone not to be shy. Ralph didn't stand on ceremony. His teeth weren't good, and he couldn't eat them, so he offered them to Hermione, whose teeth were very well maintained. Hermione glared at Ralph, then covered her cheek with lingering fear, saying, "My gums have been bleeding lately, so I won't eat any." The last time she ate rock cakes, she hadn't had any experience and almost broke her teeth. Shirley waved her hand politely. "I ate a bit too much this morning, I'm not hungry now." Neville didn't know how to refuse, so he blurted out, "Hagrid, your rock cakes are delicious, really, just as good as the school food. Neville, if you like them, that's good. Take them back to your dorm and eat them slowly, and get some for Ralph too." Hagrid walked to the fireplace, pointed to an egg in the fire, and said, "Ralph, the reason I asked you to come here today is actually to ask you to help me see how to hatch this dragon egg." "A dragon egg? Where did you get it, Hagrid?" Hermione jumped off her chair in surprise. She walked to the fire and carefully examined the large egg. "I want it back," Hagrid said smugly. "I won it playing cards with a strange wizard at the Hogshead in Hogsmeade during the Christmas holidays, but private dragon ownership is illegal, isn't it?" Hermione asked seriously. The Wizarding Convention of 1709 passed a law banning dragon ownership. "If you're caught, oh. As long as I don't get caught, as long as I'm careful," Hagrid said somewhat guiltily, pulling a book from under his pillow. "This is a book I borrowed from the library. It talks about how to hatch dragon eggs." Ralph glanced at the book, "Dragon Ownership for Recreation and Profit," and shook his head. "This book is a bit outdated. Some of the hatching methods it provides are quite obsolete." "I know." Hagrid rubbed his hands together and laughed. "Ralph, you're the expert, that's why I asked you for help. You've seen dragons hatch in Romania, right?" "Not often," Ralph said modestly, waving his hand. "I've only seen about a dozen wild dragon eggs hatch, thanks to the generous donor. Did you update today, for the donation? Chapter 88. Your fire dragon is great, but it'll be mine in the next second." Hagrid looked at Ralph with envy. Being able to be close to so many dragons was truly a blessing. He sighed softly. "I also want to go to Romania to raise dragons, but Professor Dumbledore can't do without me, and Hogwarts can't do without me either. If only our school could have a dragon farm." Ralph disagreed with the first part of Hagrid's statement, but felt the second part was truly insightful. Ralph believed Professor Snape would also agree to the dragon farm proposal. The difference lay in Hagrid wanting live dragons, and Snape wanting dead ones. Ralph walked to the fireplace, gazing at the dragon egg, when suddenly a ding sounded in his mind. One unhatched domesticated dragon egg detected, triggering side quest 1, help the Norwegian Ridgeback dragon hatch. Reward, thick skin, consumes a large amount of magic power, greatly increasing the skin's magic resistance and defense, protecting the body from magical damage like dragon scales, and even reflecting spells. Side quest 2, complete the 100% taming of the Norwegian Ridgeback. Reward magic, flaming dragon breath, consumes magic to create a ball of dragon breath, which explodes upon impact or upon reaching the target location, dealing additional magic damage and burning enemies. Hagrid, holding up raising dragons for recreation and profit, stammered as he read, according to the identification method in the book. "I got a Norwegian Ridgeback. To hatch it, you have to put the egg in the fire, because the dragon mother breathes on the egg." Ralph used fire tongs to lift the dragon egg from the fire. Sherry, Hermione, and Neville all gathered around. It was the first time they had ever seen a dragon egg. The egg was larger than an ostrich egg, too big to hold in one hand. The shell was covered with tiny scales, reflecting the firelight and emitting a deep black metallic sheen, with dark red markings. "So beautiful," Hermione murmured. "Like a work of art," Sherry exclaimed. "As captivating as the eyes of a salamander," Ralph couldn't help but marvel. "It's as beautiful as a datura flower," Neville stammered. Hagrid, also mesmerized, gazed at the dragon egg, carefully taking it from Ralph's hands and resting it against his belly. Holding the egg, "I can feel the little guy moving. Oh, Merlin, what a restless little fellow, it's kicking my belly." Hagrid was completely immersed in his role as a doting father. "Hagrid, the fireplace flames are too cold." Ralph glanced at the dark fireplace and shook his head. "Dragon eggs are incubated by the mother dragon using flames. Like breastfeeding, the fireplace flames you're using are less effective. It will be born weak and, as an adult, won't be as strong as other dragons. What should I do?" Hagrid looked panicked. His dragon baby couldn't afford to lose at the starting line. "We can use phoenix flames instead," Ralph said. "Let Fox nurse it." "Oops, hatching it wouldn't be bad either." "No, I haven't told Dumbledore about the dragon eggs yet. Hagrid waved his hand. If the headmaster finds out, he definitely won't allow us to keep a dragon. Then let's use enchanted fire. Getting some ancient blaze would be good too. Hagrid looked blank. What's that? A kind of enchanted flame that can burn forever, Hermione quickly said. It's a very advanced spell, only a few wizards can do it. Hagrid shook his head. I don't have any. Looks like our conditions are a bit tough, huh? Ralph rested his chin on his hand. Thought for a moment, and said, how about this? We'll use a fire serpent egg. Don't tell me I don't have any either. We do have fire serpents. Hagrid nodded. Fire serpents are magical creatures that hatch when flames burn uncontrollably for too long. Fire serpent eggs are extremely hot and emit a strong light. It would be best to put a few pieces of dragon crystal under the fire serpent, Ralph continued. Dragon crystal, it's obsidian. It's a gemstone formed when volcanic lava suddenly cools. It has very strong magical energy, Ralph explained. Seeing Hagrid's blank expression, Ralph sighed. You don't have any, do you? I have some. I'll lend you a few later. I really don't know how to thank you, Hagrid said, pressing Ralph's shoulder. It's nothing, Hagrid. Your dragon is my dragon. Ralph blinked. How could I not do my best? Shara gave the boy a meaningful look. Inside the small black leather case, standing in front of a burning flame, Ralph picked through the pieces and took out several dragon crystals. One of them was a dark black dragon crystal, interspersed with golden specks, with wavy patterns. The stone was fine and dense, and extremely heavy. Because it had been handled by the fire lizard for so long, when the boy rubbed it, it even seemed to sparkle with a sharp edge. The salamander, seeing its precious creature taken away, was very aggrieved. It leaned forward and banged its head against Rove's arm, whimpering. Rove rubbed the salamander's little head and laughed. It's just for a few days, don't be so stingy. He squatted down beside it, picked up the stones, and slowly turned them over, examining them intently. Not far away, Sherry was feeding a group of roosters. They pecked at the food, crowing loudly. Rove had gotten these roosters from Hagrid, but he hadn't explained why and kept them in a box. After Sherry finished scattering the last round of food, she sat down in a chair and suddenly asked, Rove, are you thinking of keeping Hagrid's fire dragon? How did you know? Rove asked, somewhat surprised. I could tell from your expression. Was it that obvious? Rove rubbed his cheek. It's practically written all over his face. Alright, Sherry, dragons grow very fast. In just a few months, it'll be bigger than Hagrid's cabin. He simply can't keep a dragon, Ralph said seriously, the flickering campfire illuminating the boy's handsome face, giving him a unique charm. He'll have to give up the dragon sooner or later, so we're just in a good position to take it over. Hagrid's dragon was fine, but it would soon be Ralph's. Shirley gave a no, stretched out her arms, interlaced her fingers, and gazed into the distance, saying, fire dragons are hard to raise, aren't they? Yes, fire dragons aren't delicate, but they have a fierce temper and are troublesome to deal with. They also have huge appetites. An adult fire dragon can easily eat a whole cow in one meal. Raising a fire dragon definitely takes a lot of energy. Ralph suddenly widened his eyes and said, Shirley, you're not implying I should give you a raise, are you? Shirley gazed at the boy's smiling face, rubbed her stomach, and sighed. I meant to say, raising these magical creatures is very physically demanding. I didn't eat enough in the Great Hall last night, and suddenly I feel a little hungry. Alright, I'll go make you some late-night snacks. I won't leave the good ingredients for Fox, I'll make them for you. Ralph stood up and walked towards the kitchen, saying, would you like moga crab meat, or nightbird tenderloin? Or perhaps some shield crab roe and vanilla pudding? Which do you think is tastier? Shirley watched the boy's retreating figure, her eyes narrowing into crescents. Her red ponytail suddenly turned gold, then quickly returned to red. The girl with the ponytail smiled softly. They're all delicious. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Author's note on the launch of Chapter 89. This is my 4th time writing a post-publication message. As a seasoned, just kidding, newbie, I'm always nervous and excited when writing this. A month and a half has passed, and 210,000 words have been written. Finally, it's going to be published. My habit of not abandoning projects, however, was broken with my last book, A wound that still aches for me. I still remember that night, April 1st, around 10 p.m. I was typing away when my supervisor suddenly called, sternly asking about my thesis. He said there was a serious error. I was completely stunned. The core of my thesis revolved around that section. If there was an error, the entire thesis was ruined, and there were only a few days left until the blind review. That period was truly the most difficult time for me. I stayed up all night revising the thesis, and every morning when I arrived at the research group, my supervisor would message me, "Come to the office." Then, I would take my thesis to his office to be criticized. My fellow PhD students saw me every day, worried that I would become the first student in the group not to graduate. You can imagine the psychological pressure. I was incredibly busy and overwhelmed. Finally, I passed a blind review, then rushed to prepare my defense presentation, and finally graduated smoothly. First, I apologize to the readers of my previous book. The new book returns to a familiar theme, Hogwarts. In a certain magical Hogwarts, I learned some lessons and gained experience. Currently, this is my best performing book, having been featured on Zioba and Sanjiang for the first time. I must thank every reader for their contributions of reading, recommendation votes, monthly tickets, and donations, supporting me to this point. Although I'm still a flop, at least I've made some progress. Here, I also want to thank my editor, Green Bean. From the beginning of this book, Green Bean has communicated with me, patiently reviewing my work and providing revision suggestions. This book has remained steadfastly by my side. I'm truly heartbroken. I also thank my editor, Good Luck, who always answers my questions quickly. Finally, back to the novel's content. In a certain magical Hogwarts, I expanded the story of Death and the Nine Deathly Hallows, which I consider one of the few redeeming qualities of that book. This book, also based on the original worldview, has been slightly expanded. I hope all readers will be patient and give it a chance to continue reading. Most importantly, regarding the first subscription, it will be available tomorrow at noon. 5 chapters, 10,000 words each. See you there. I hope all readers will subscribe if they've read this far, or at least give a first subscription. Cronials in the toilet. Regarding bonus chapters, I habitually add 1 chapter for each patron, 10,000 coins reward. Currently, I owe 10 chapters to the patron Sane, and 9 chapters to 4 other patrons, and a total of 19 chapters are owed. The current readership is fluctuating around 3,700. To be bold, if the first subscription reaches 3,000, I'll add 1 chapter for every 100 over. My basic daily update is 2 chapters of 4,000 words, anything beyond that counts as bonus chapters. I, too, want to explode with sales, want to write 10,000 words a day, want to be completely drained. It all depends on whether you, my dear readers, have the ability. It will be available for purchase tomorrow at noon sharp. See you there. Thank you, everyone. Brothers, the release of the voucher may be delayed due to system issues, but it won't be later than 12:05 p.m. Thank you. Due to system problems, there may be a delay, at most 12:05 p.m. Please be patient, everyone. Chapter 90 Nicholas Flamel. Rolf built a makeshift dragon egg hatchery for Hagrid. A fireplace was used as the main structure, lined with magical charcoal and dragon crystal, and then the fire serpent and its egg were placed inside. To prevent the fire serpent from escaping, the hatchery was coated with a layer of angelica sap. This was the smell the fire serpent hated most, limiting their movement and preventing them from setting the cabin ablaze. As the fireplace was completed, the temperature of the entire house rose, making it feel like a sweltering summer day. Tooth refused to sleep in the cabin, lying on its back at the door every day, displaying its powerful firepower. Rolf passed by several times, and the thought of permanently neutering it crossed his mind. Perhaps if it were neutered, it wouldn't have so many worldly thoughts, and maybe Tooth would become bolder. Hagrid, on the other hand, stayed by the fireplace every day, without opening windows, ventilating, or bathing. Anyone who didn't know better would think he was in postpartum confinement. On the eve of Easter, Rolf's, cough cough, Hagrid's dragon was finally about to hatch. Upon receiving Hagrid's letter, Ralph and his group excitedly headed to the cabin. Witnessing a dragon hatching was a rare treat, and even Hermione, busy planning her final exams, didn't want to miss it. But before entering the cabin, Ralph suddenly slowed his pace, turning slightly to look towards the pumpkin patch in the distance. Sherry, following closely behind, bumped into the boy's back, wincing and rubbing her head. "What's wrong?" she whispered. "Someone was peeking through the window," Ralph said softly. "When they saw us, they hid in the pumpkin patch." The furtive figure, hiding under a large pumpkin, poked its head out. Seeing Scamander looking in their direction, it immediately ducked back. Realizing it had been spotted, it took off running, dashing towards the castle. "Malfoy?" Neville stared at the figure, puzzled. "What's he doing here?" Harry and Ron, invited by Hagrid to watch the dragon hatch, had arrived early and, hearing Ron and the others' conversation, quickly left the room. Harry stood at the cabin door, watching the figure disappear quickly, and frowned. "Malfoy probably followed Ron and me." Ron glared at Malfoy's retreating back, snarling, "I thought he'd changed after Halloween, that he wasn't so annoying anymore. I didn't expect him to be even worse now, starting to stalk us." On Halloween Eve, Malfoy was trapped in the bathroom by Harry and Ron, where they encountered a troll, and the two went back to rescue him. After that, their relationship improved somewhat. At least they no longer had to engage in a dangerous fight every time they met. But after the Christmas holidays, Ginny wrote a letter recounting her experience on the Orient Express and mentioning her conflict with Lucius Malfoy. Harry and Ron's impression of Malfoy worsened again. Ron looked at him strangely. Malfoy was already following Harry around at such a young age. What would he become when he grew up? It was unimaginable. Could Malfoy have already seen the dragon eggs? Hermione asked worriedly. Hagrid's face turned pale upon hearing this. He knew better than anyone the consequences of being caught by the Ministry of Magic keeping a dragon. After all, he had been caught keeping an eight-eyed spider and had even been imprisoned in Azkaban. "Malfoy will definitely go to Snape and complain," Harry said decisively. "That's right, Malfoy would love for us to get points deducted," Ron agreed. Ron, however, didn't agree with their guesses. Knowing Malfoy as he did, he was more likely to use this as leverage to blackmail Harry into doing things that Malfoy would only dare to dream of. Just then, a cracking sound came from the dragon eggs in the incubator. The shells were cracking. The group forgot about Malfoy and went to the incubator to observe. The scorching flame seemed to be absorbed by the dragon egg in an instant. The embers burned quickly, leaving only ashes. Wandering sparks drifted out, and heat rippled and shimmered around the egg before finally settling into stillness. The eggshell finally cracked completely. A wrinkled black dragon hatched, with a long, white nose, horns on its head, and bulging orange-red eyes. Hagrid went to prepare food, while Ralph stood by the fireplace, reaching out to pick up the dragon as if holding a child. The black and red Norwegian Spinosaurus draped its small head over his shoulder, its bright red eyes staring at everyone. "Ha!" It exhaled forcefully, but only a puff of white smoke appeared. "Hurry up and drink. Little one. Mommy's feeding you." Hagrid brought over brandy and chicken blood, the food the newborn dragon needed. The black Norwegian Spinosaurus buried its head in the basin, as if drinking mother's milk, its tiny red tongue licking it greedily, occasionally spitting out a few sparks from its nostrils. Newborn dragons are at their cutest in life. They're not large enough for an average person to hold, their breath is weak and won't burn anyone, and their fangs haven't even grown in yet, so they can be played with without worrying about injury. Everyone quickly lined up to take turns holding the newborn baby dragon. However, Toothless didn't like this baby dragon. Hagrid had just given it all its fluffy toys, which the little guy had torn to shreds. Toothless growled at the dragon, as if it were Hagrid's second offspring, while it, the firstborn, was being ignored and neglected. But its bravery would only last a few days. Next week, the dragon would probably be bigger than it, and then it was hard to say who'd bully whom. While everyone was watching the dragon, Harry and Ron pulled Ralph aside. Harry whispered, "Ralph, I have something to ask you." Ralph wiped the dust off his clothes from holding the dragon and said softly, "What is it?" "Do you know Nicholas Flamel?" Harry asked cautiously. "I know. Who is he?" Harry asked excitedly. They had searched for a long time but couldn't find the identity of this wizard whose name Hagrid had revealed. They never expected Ron to know. "Nico Flamel is the greatest alchemist of our time." Ron sat back in a chair and said softly, "He is also the creator of the Philosopher's Stone and possesses the only one in existence." "What is the Philosopher's Stone?" Harry and Ron both looked confused. "The Philosopher's Stone can turn any metal into pure gold and can also create an elixir of immortality. Anyone who drinks it will never die," Ron exclaimed. "Nico Flamel just celebrated his 665th birthday last year." Harry and Ron exchanged a glance. "That big dog on the 4th floor must be guarding Flamel's Philosopher's Stone." I dare say Flamel asked Dumbledore to keep it for him. They are friends, and he knew someone was after the Philosopher's Stone, so he moved it out of Gringotts. Harry was excited. He felt like he had figured everything out. It can make gold and grant immortality. No wonder that person is after the Philosopher's Stone, Ron said enviously. Everyone wants it, Harry and Ron chimed in, finally telling Ron and Harry their theory. Snape was stealing the Philosopher's Stone. Do you have enough evidence, Harry? Ron asked calmly. Making assumptions without sufficient evidence is a fatal mistake. It can lead to misjudgments and biased conclusions. You don't just assume he's a bad guy because Professor Snape likes to deduct points from your grades, do you? Harry was speechless. He didn't have any evidence, but he still clenched his fist and insisted, it's definitely Snape. Remember that Halloween? He wasn't looking for trolls in the underground classrooms. He went to the forbidden area alone, and that night, I saw him threatening Quirrell. Quirrell finally lost his temper and fought with Snape. Oh, and that night in the hospital corridor, you were the one who knocked over the armor. Ron stared at Harry. At the time, he had guessed that someone had used the disillusionment charm or the invisibility cloak to hide nearby, but he hadn't expected it to be Harry. Harry was also surprised. Were you near the school hospital that night? But I didn't see you, Harry. You're not the only one who can turn invisible, Ralph said. However, since you suspect Professor Snape, I suggest you tell Professor Dumbledore your deduction, but I don't think the headmaster will believe me. Harry hesitated for a moment, then said, even you don't believe me, that's because your evidence is insufficient. Reasoning without sufficient evidence is always a dangerous thing, Ralph reminded him. Harry, don't let someone's appearance or your personal emotions affect your judgment. Ralph ended the conversation abruptly. Of course, he wouldn't participate in Harry and Ron's adventure game. The restricted area on the 4th floor was Dumbledore's bait to lure Voldemort, and also a test he set for Harry. Since it was a test, a game, how bored would Ralph have to be to follow Harry around to try and save the Philosopher's Stone, which didn't even need saving? He had his own things to do, like capturing a cute basilisk. The system's release at 7 p.m. was delayed by a few minutes. What a pain. Thanks to Trooper 1770 for the 10,000 coin reward. Thanks to 161,205,213,652,567, and for their rewards. Chapter 91 Gas Frog. Malfoy ran quickly down the corridor. Realizing no one was following, he bent over, clutching his knees and panting heavily. Malfoy had only been following Harry to see what he was doing, but instead discovered the dragon egg. What a pleasant surprise. Malfoy pondered whether to inform Professor Snape and have him deduct points from Gryffindor's grades, or to keep this little leverage to blackmail Harry into doing something. The former was a one-time thrill, while the latter was every-time thrill. Malfoy didn't need much hesitation to decide. Of course, it was the every-time thrill, ultimately becoming his master's task. After resting for a while, Malfoy prepared to return to the Slytherin common room, but as he turned a corner, he bumped into a figure, stumbled backward, and fell to the ground. Malfoy yelled, "Who is it? Are your eyes on the back of your head?" I'm sorry," the man stammered, reaching out to help him up, asking with concern, "Are you alright?" Malfoy looked up and saw it was the bald Professor Quirrell. He quickly scrambled to his feet, waving his hand. "I'm fine, Professor, you look like you've hurt yourself badly." Professor Quirrell glanced at Malfoy, then said seriously, "Come on, to my office, I'll check you over." "No need, Professor." Malfoy quickly shook off Quirrell's hand. "I'm really fine. I said to my office, I'll check if you're hurt." Quirrell suddenly stopped stammering, saying coldly, "Listen to me." Malfoy's eyes suddenly glazed over. He followed Professor Quirrell towards the Defense Against the Dark Arts office. On the eve of Easter, Hufflepuff and Gryffindor played their final tournament. Hufflepuff's total points were over 100 points higher than Slytherin's, so regardless of the outcome, they would advance to the finals. But for Gryffindor to reach the final, they needed to score 260 points in this match, surpassing Slytherin's total points. This was undoubtedly difficult. Gryffindor's seeker was far inferior to Cedric's. They struggled to catch the golden snitch, let alone score 26 balls in the Hufflepuff basket, unless the Hufflepuff goalkeeper bet on their own loss. Of course, letting Gryffindor into the final might be easier than Slytherin, well, much easier. But the Hufflepuff Quidditch team was a team with a strong competitive spirit. They wouldn't deliberately throw the game, they would go all out. The result was predictable. Gryffindor suffered a crushing defeat, forced to watch Hufflepuff reach the Quidditch Grand Final for the second consecutive year. Lee, the commentator, burst into tears on the field. His voice trembling with sobs, he cried out in anguish, "The Gryffindor team, on whom we placed so much hope, has once again fallen short of the finals. I've always believed these boys are stronger than Hufflepuff and Slytherin in terms of raw talent. I hope they can come back stronger next year and aim for the championship." Did stronger talent mean consistently underperforming year after year, failing to even reach the finals? Lee was met with a deafening chorus of boos from the Badgers and Snakes, and many students threw water bottles at him. Gryffindor lost, and it was another heartbreaking year for Professor McGonagall. To alleviate her disappointment, she assigned her students a massive amount of Transfiguration homework over the Easter holidays, almost as much as the other teachers combined. In addition to the heavy workload, Hermione also devised a detailed study plan. Sitting in a library chair, Hermione looked at the listless Ralph and encouraged him, "Come on, we only have 2 months left until the final exams." Ralph looked at the densely packed schedule, with his schedule almost down to the second, and could only sigh. "What a schedule, Hermione. I'm still previewing, and you've already started reviewing?" Neville asked, looking horrified. "It's already late," Hermione said, somewhat exasperated. "I heard some students started reviewing during the Christmas break." Hermione was clearly overthinking it. Students who started reviewing months in advance were a minority. Reviewing a week before the exam was already considered good. Many Hufflepuff students crammed the night before the exam, and that was pretty much it. Besides homework and busy reviewing, Ralph spent the entire Easter break focusing on the female swoosh bird. Completely taming a magical creature wasn't easy. It was like a lock. You had to constantly hone your key so it could not only fit into the keyhole but also open the lock smoothly. To tame magical creatures, besides conveying your goodwill, the most important thing is to cater to their preferences and cultivate their favor. Like that wicked bird, it loved to sing, and Ralph endured 3 days of listening to it sing. Each time he finished, he felt dizzy and had to immediately take a sedative to soothe his wounded soul. What did the female Hufflepuff like? Male Hufflepuff, of course. Ralph had to painfully sacrifice his charms, smearing himself with the urine secreted by the male Hufflepuff every day and performing strange dances to seduce her. By the end of Easter, Ralph had finally succeeded in taming the female Hufflepuff. That evening, when he left the Hufflepuff's nest, he felt utterly exhausted and listless. Ralph took a bath to wash away the smell of urine, changed his clothes, and knew he had 2 more events to attend that night. He needed to go to the Forbidden Forest. The boy left the Hufflepuff lounge, mounted his flying broom, and flew towards the Forbidden Forest. The weather was bad tonight. Large, dark clouds obscured the sky, making the Forbidden Forest appear very tranquil under the night sky. Ronan, familiar with the route, arrived at the agreed-upon spot. He whistled, and a moment later, a red centaur emerged from the grass. "You're so slow, Ronan," Ronan complained, brushing the leaves off his body and flicking his reddish-brown tail. "If you'd been any later, I would have gone back. I've been very busy lately, with a ton of homework," Ronan replied. After landing, Ronan asked curiously, "Do you centaurs check every night to see if anyone hasn't returned home?" "Of course," Ronan sighed. "Centaurs have different lifestyles than humans. We are fewer in number and live in communes. We are generally forbidden from going out at night." Ronan took out a package and handed it to him. Inside were Honeydukes snacks. When they first met, Ronan had mentioned wanting to eat Honeydukes Sundeer honey candies. Nit had brought him some years ago, and he still remembered it vividly. Rob thought it was reasonable to exchange food for information about the Forbidden Forest, so he began a stable trade with Ronan. "I've marked the location of the gas frog colony on the map," Ronan said, handing over a map. "They've migrated several times. I had to consult an elder in the family for divination to find their location." The gas frog's territory was marked on the Scamander family's map, but Rob had been there once and found they had long since migrated, so he had to ask Ronan to find them. Ronan picked up a large piece of honey candy, put it in his mouth, and after a few chews, immediately clicked his tongue. "Delicious," he chewed slowly, then suddenly asked, "By the way, have you seen Nymeria in the Forbidden Forest recently?" Rob thought for a moment before realizing what he meant. He shook his head and said, "Bane's runaway fiancée? I haven't seen her. You centaurs are in the Forbidden Forest every day, and you even know divination. If you can't find her, how am I supposed to?" "What's wrong?" the boy asked curiously. "We found Nymeria in the tribe last time," and almost caught her. Ronan sighed. There was a battle, but she escaped. Now the tribe has decided to banish Nymeria. If we see her again, we won't just capture her alive, we're going to kill her. Ronan carefully packed his pack, saying, "You often wander in the Forbidden Forest. If you see Nymeria someday, remind her to be careful." "I don't care about your centaur tribe's affairs," Rav said, crossing his arms and remounting his flying broom. Ronan sighed, looking up at the sky. "The nebula is dim tonight. Goodbye, Rav. Good luck." Ronan sped away, probably planning to find a cave to hide the food first, otherwise, bringing it back to the centaur tribe would definitely be discovered. Rav turned his flying broom around and quickly flew into the distance, heading towards the gas frog's territory. Chapter 92 The Hunting Centaur. Ralph schemed along the forest on his flying broomstick, winding his way through the mountain paths until he reached a swamp shrouded in purple mist. He donned his gas mask and flew over the muddy swamp, searching for gas frogs. Gas frogs, like Pegasus, are a general term for a type of magical creature, categorized based on their habitat: poisonous gas frogs, sleeping gas frogs, paralyzing gas frogs, and exploding gas frogs. As their names suggest, each type releases gas with different magical effects. Ralph's target was the exploding gas frog. Their magical talent allowed them to create a special magical substance that, once sprayed, would trigger a massive explosion with even the slightest spark. Ralph's current magic, while seemingly diverse, was mostly single-target attacks, rarely dealing wide-area damage. The exploding gas frog's magical talent could perfectly compensate for his current lack of power. Mist rose above the swamp, and suddenly the sound of hooves echoed from within. Ralph pricked up his ears warily. What were centaurs doing nearby? Given his flying speed, Ronan couldn't have caught up so quickly. It could only be another centaur. But aside from Ronan, most centaurs were hostile to wizards. Bane, whom Rove had encountered before, had pointed an arrow at his head the moment they met. Having learned his lesson, Rove had to be cautious upon hearing the sound of hooves again. If you were ambushed and died in this desolate place, no one would know. He flicked his flying broom and stealthily flew towards the source of the sound. The night provided Rove with excellent camouflage. But he was still young and lacked combat experience, underestimating the detection abilities of a top hunter. The movement of the mist created by the flying broom made the centaur instantly aware of someone approaching from behind. She whirled around, raised her bow, and drew a finely crafted arrow from her quiver. The young man whispered, "Dazzling flash." The magic from the dazzling bird caused Rove's eyes to blaze with dazzling white light. The centaur felt as if she were going blind. Everything was a blinding white blur. But guided by instinct, she released her grip on the bowstring, which snapped with a loud bang, and an arrow shot towards the enemy. At such close range, it was enough to pierce the opponent's body, instantly incapacitating them. But Ralph didn't dodge. His skin suddenly turned silver gray, as if coated with dragon scales, and the arrow was violently deflected by his skin, embedding itself diagonally in the swamp. Ralph's flying broom swiftly flew towards the centaur. She closed her eyes, feeling the wind rush past her ears, and instantly drew a short sword from her waist, slashing in a certain direction. But she was only halfway through the slash when her hands were tightly bound by a vine, and then Ralph appeared beside the centaur, punching him in the chest, intending to force him to bend over before delivering a beautiful flying knee. But to her surprise, the punch felt like hitting a large piece of cotton, soft and incredibly elastic. Ralph had no choice but to flick her wrist, letting the vine wrap around the short sword, and then smash the back of the blade into the centaur's pale neck, knocking him unconscious. Sitting atop his flying broomstick, Ralph finally had the leisure to observe his opponent, a centaur woman with long, golden hair and a ponytail. She was exceptionally tall, yet not physically imposing. Rather, she possessed a striking, almost heroic air. Her face was stunningly beautiful, but she exuded a wild and untamed aura. A ruby hung from her throat, reflecting light like the red glow of a comet. Gems also adorned her earlobes. She carried various weapons, sharpened spears, stone mallets, daggers, nets, and even several rusty swords. Centaurs typically went naked, but this centaur woman wore a mesh garment woven from vines, her breasts heavy like ears of wheat, almost capable of snapping the vines. Suddenly, a ding sounded in Ralph's mind. A female centaur detected, triggering a side quest. Complete 100% taming of Nymeria. Reward: Nymeria's divination talent. Quest incomplete. Ralph paused, narrowing his eyes in deep thought. Why did the name Nymeria sound so familiar? Wasn't she Bane's fiancée? System, she's someone else's fiancée. Even though she ran away. You want me to tame her? What do you take me for? After an unknown amount of time, Nymeria slowly awoke. Her eyes were only slightly dazed before instantly sharpening. She discovered she wasn't blind, her vision had returned. But her body was already bound to a tree by a thick vine. A young wizard was riding a flying broomstick, a firefly lantern at one end, reading a book. You're awake. Ralph stood up, lazily stretching his neck, and bent down to meet Nymeria's gaze. Why did you attack me? I didn't mean to attack you, wizard, Nymeria said, catching her breath. You sneaked up on me, and I thought Bane and the others had found me, so I cautiously raised my bow and arrow. Ralph sighed. It was a misunderstanding, both sides were overly sensitive, assuming the other was a centaur. Then why are you here? Ralph asked again. Nymeria didn't answer, but instead asked, Ronan sent you here, didn't he? Rob frowned, vehemently denying it. I don't know Ronan, don't be nervous, Rob's Scamander, Nymeria said softly. Ronan said you were looking for the gas frog's habitat. He didn't know either, but I divined it was in this area and told him. You told him? Rob raised an eyebrow. What's your relationship with Ronan that he's helping you so much? No relationship, Nymeria shook her head. Ronan just doesn't want to see me killed. He sent me to you to make a deal. Rob stared intently at Nymeria. What kind of deal? I know this forest better than Ronan, Nymeria gasped. I can do whatever you're trading with him. I know things he doesn't, because my divination is better than his. He can tell just by looking at the gas frog. He can't find it, but I can divine it. Ronan wants Honiduk's food. You wouldn't want that too, would you? Rob asked with interest. No, Nymeria said earnestly, I escaped from the centaur tribe with almost nothing of value. I want to trade for something useful. What? Weapons and supplies. Ralph leaned back slightly, glanced at Nymeria, and frowned. With your skills, you could survive in this forest with just that bow, right? That's right, Nymeria smiled, a spirited smile playing on her lips. But you can't hunt centaurs with just these things. 3 chapters, 8,000 words in total. 2 more chapters at 6 p.m, see you then. Chapter 93 Harry, we're going to be strangled. Ralph went to the Forbidden Forest but didn't find the gas frog. Instead, he encountered Bane's fiancée, Nymeria. According to her, she possessed extraordinary divination abilities, exceptional even among centaurs. Centaurs were unwilling to share their divination with the wizards, but she was willing, only, for a fee. The fee was weapons and some supplies to support her fight against the centaur tribe's pursuit. Ralph hesitated. He didn't particularly like centaurs, but he remained lawfully neutral, neither taking sides. Providing weapons and supplies would mean switching sides, wouldn't it? If discovered, he would face hostility and attacks from the centaur tribe. Cooperating with Nymeria required caution. Throughout Easter, Voldemort still hadn't made a move, even though he had obtained a method to subdue Fluffy. Ralph was almost certain that Tom was hiding in the Chamber of Secrets, but whether he would use the basilisk was still unknown. But regardless of whether he used the basilisk, Ralph planned to sneak into the Chamber of Secrets and steal Voldemort's home on the day he stole the Philosopher's Stone. Come on, let's switch sides. But the key to stealing the Philosopher's Stone was knowing when Voldemort would act. It was simple. To steal the stone, he first needed to lure Dumbledore out of Hogwarts. Dumbledore's movements could be monitored by the wicked bird in the headmaster's office. The day the headmaster suddenly left was likely the moment Voldemort was about to make his move. Myrtle was also monitoring the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. And then there was Quirrell himself. In Voldemort's current state, he needed Quirrell's body to steal the stone. Monitoring him was equivalent to monitoring Voldemort indirectly. Ron invaded the wicked bird's body daily to check Quirrell's location. During this process, he also discovered something quite amusing. Harry and Ron frequently visited Quirrell, giving him a smile and encouraging words, telling him not to give in to Snape, that perseverance would bring hope. This was a ridiculous joke. It could only be said that the clumsy Quirrell, while not fooling Dumbledore, had fooled Harry. After Easter, the Quidditch finals approached. Last year's championship battle had continued into this year, and the pent-up resentment and grudges were palpable. Fights frequently broke out between students from the 2 houses in the corridors. Hufflepuff, though discreet, was no pushover. Besides, badgers eat snakes. The Slytherin students seemed intent on drugging Cedric, replicating his leg-throbbing weakness from the previous term. But Hufflepuff had become more cautious, their team only eating food brought by house elves. The Slytherin students often mocked Hufflepuff's perennial runner-up status. They also said the Gryffindor team consistently played subserviently against Slytherins, beating them like a father beating his own son. And the Ravenclaw team was considered easy prey. This behavior of stirring up hatred naturally angered the other three houses, who united to harass Slytherin. On the morning of the match, Ralph was eating at the Hufflepuff table when a harpy bird landed on his table and whispered in the boy's ear. The harpy bird brought news, simple as it was. Professor Dumbledore had received an urgent letter from the Ministry of Magic and had left for London. Ron slowly ate a sausage. He had a lot to do today, so he needed to eat well to have the energy to work. The Quidditch pitch was packed with people. Harry and Ron, looking terrified, ran against a flow of people towards the faculty and staff stands. They had just learned that when Hagrid got the dragon egg, he had told the strange wizard about Fluffy's weakness, his tendency to fall asleep when listening to music. They ran to Professor McGonagall, Harry panting, "Professor, I think I know. Snape, someone tried to steal the Philosopher's Stone. I have to speak to Professor Dumbledore." Professor McGonagall looked at him suspiciously. "Professor Dumbledore has gone to London and will be back tomorrow." She shook her head and said, "Potter, I don't know how you found out about the Philosopher's Stone, but rest assured, no one can steal it. It's under tight protection and absolutely safe." "But Professor Potter, I know what I'm saying," McGonagall said sternly. "I suggest you watch the game and stop thinking about all this nonsense. If you lose fewer points, we'll be grateful if you can help Gryffindor win the House Cup next year." The two were scolded and had no choice but to slink away. Ron whispered, "Harry, Snape hasn't come to the stadium yet. Dumbledore isn't at Hogwarts either." Harry asserted, "Snape will definitely try to steal the Philosopher's Stone as soon as the game starts." "Then what do we do?" Ron asked. Harry glanced at the Hufflepuff stands. He had wanted to ask Ron for help, since he could easily defeat trolls, but he couldn't find the boy. "We'll go steal the Philosopher's Stone now." Harry had made his decision. On the fourth floor, in the restricted area, Harry and Ron, wearing their invisibility cloaks, noticed the wooden door had been ajar. Entering the room, they saw a harp on the floor. They were even more certain Snape had been there. Harry and Ron went inside. Fluffy stood up and growled. Harry quickly pulled out the flute Hagrid had given him and started playing. Fluffy swayed, seemingly drunk, and soon collapsed to the floor, falling asleep. Ron tiptoed towards the trapdoor. He bent down, pulled the ring on the trapdoor, and the door swung open, revealing a large hole in the floor. "I can't see anything, it's pitch black, and there's no ladder to get down," Ron said. "Let's just jump," Harry said, releasing the harp. Ron was thinking, what would happen if there was nothing below? That would be too reckless. But Harry had already handed the harp to Ron. "I'll jump first. If nothing goes wrong, you follow. If something does go wrong, send Hedwig to Dumbledore." "Okay." Ron took the flute and continued playing. Fluffy, who was about to wake up, fell asleep again. Harry jumped down the passage, plummeting rapidly. In just a few seconds, he reached the bottom, but instead of hitting the ground, he landed on something soft. "No problem, Ron," Harry shouted excitedly towards the opening. "Jump quickly, there's no danger." Ron put away his flute and jumped down, landing quickly beside Harry. He chuckled, "It's pretty safe, and quite soft." "What's this?" "I don't know." Harry shook his head, guessing, maybe some kind of plant, probably laid here to cushion the impact of a fall. "Luckily there's this pile of plants here." Ron was relieved, but before he could finish speaking, he cried out. The plant extended snake-like tendrils that wrapped around his ankles, and Harry's legs were also entangled by long vines. They desperately tore at the vines, but the more they struggled, the tighter they became. "What is this?" Harry yelled. I don't know either," Ron shouted. "Does anyone recognize this thing? Did Professor Sprout mention it in class?" "I don't know. Even if he did, I've forgotten everything." "The Philosopher's Stone, don't mention that, Harry. We're going to be strangled." "Thanks to the new patron for the donation." "The second patron, thank you." "Thanks to A745, and for their donations." Chapter 94 Forbidden Zone. In the abandoned washroom, Ralph, carrying a small black leather suitcase, stood before the broken mirror, cheerfully fixing his hair. Myrtle floated in midair, gazing adoringly at the handsome face that even Miss Gray had his eye on. She asked softly, "Are you sure you want to go in?" "Of course, but is there any need to be so happy? Your mouth is practically stretched to the back of your head." Ralph looked at the grinning Myrtle in the mirror. "No, Ralph. I was just thinking of something happy." "What is it?" "If you died, I'd be willing to share this toilet with you." Myrtle blushed, her face turning silvery white. Although I don't want to compete with Miss Gray for a man, someone like you. I'm willing to give it a try. My toilet is very good, and it even has a jacuzzi. I will seriously consider your suggestion." Ralph stared at the side of the bronze faucet, and hissed at the small snake, shouting in parsley, "Open!" The bronze faucet emitted an extremely dazzling white light and began to spin rapidly. The pool also slowly moved downwards, as if a mechanism had been opened, finally revealing a very thick water pipe and an entrance as tall as a person. Ralph crawled into the water pipe and slid down along it. He raised his wand, the tip of which gleamed, illuminating the surroundings. This pipe had countless openings, connecting to other pipes in a complex network. Obviously, following any of the drainage pipes of Hogwarts would eventually lead to the secret chamber, but the entire system was too complex, like a maze, and it was easy to get completely lost before even finding it. Ralph slid along this thick pipe, winding and turning like a mountain path, but overall, he was sliding deeper into the maze. Ralph couldn't help but think that the Chamber of Secrets could be developed into a roller coaster ride for students to pay for. The pipe finally leveled, and the boy emerged from the opening. Vines held him back, slowing him down and preventing him from flying out. Ralph stood up, his feet on solid ground. It was dark all around, his wand could only illuminate a small area. The boy pulled a magical barometer from his small black suitcase. It could determine altitude based on atmospheric pressure. According to the barometer, he was 1,000 meters underground, below the Black Lake and the Slytherin Common Room. Ralph walked forward, his eyes suddenly flashing like spotlights, allowing him to see the entire tunnel. He walked to one side of the tunnel, where there was a small statue of a young wizard, a smug, mischievous grin on his face. Engraved on the back of the statue was a name, Corvinus Gaunt. Ralph silently memorized the name. He picked up his black suitcase and continued walking. The ground was littered with small animal bones, and the outline of a colossal creature lay motionless on the other side of the tunnel, coiled up nearby. Light shone on a huge snakeskin, a vibrant, emerald green, suggesting the basilisk had recently shed its skin. Ralph intended to take the snakeskin, it was a treasure, and leaving it here was a waste. Of course, the most precious thing was the creature deep within the Chamber of Secrets. "Are you all right?" Harry heard that familiar stuttering voice, and it sounded more beautiful than ever before, like heavenly music. Harry struggled to his feet, tearing the black vines away. He brushed the dust off his clothes, almost crying, and said gratefully, "Thank you, Professor Quirrell." Quirrell's wand shot out a burst of fire, freeing Ron from his bonds. He explained, "This is Devil's Web, they fear fire." Ron stood up, still shaken. "Why leave something so dangerous here? We almost got strangled." "Then why are you here?" Professor Quirrell asked. "This is forbidden territory, not a place for you, Professor." "I know someone is stealing," Harry whispered. "The Philosopher's Stone, isn't it?" "You? How did you know?" Quirrell seemed very surprised. "We guessed it a long time ago," Ron said smugly. "Professor Snape stole it, didn't he?" Quirrell stared at Ron for a moment, then sighed deeply, seemingly very distressed. "It's him. I never imagined Severus would stoop to this level." "Professor Quirrell, is Snape really working for that man?" Harry asked cautiously. "Voldemort." Quirrell reacted strongly to the name, trembling all over. "Harry, don't say that name again," Ron whispered anxiously, as if worried Voldemort would hear. "All right, but Voldemort, the man of unknown, isn't here. What's there to be afraid of?" Harry sighed. "I'm leaving," Quirrell interrupted Harry, seemingly afraid of hearing dangerous words like murderer or beast from him. He had been badly tricked by Scamander in Albania last year. "Professor Quirrell, let us go with you," Harry quickly said. "It's too dangerous for you to face Snape alone." "We can help, right, Ron?" Ron's lips twitched, as if he wanted to say trust Professor Quirrell, but in the end, he didn't, only nodding. Quirrell looked at Harry, seemingly deeply moved. He nodded and said, "Oh, as expected of you, the boy who survived. Potter, you're truly brave. Let's go, let's stop Snape together." Harry and Ron were immediately filled with confidence. Ron asked curiously. "Professor, why are you wearing a scarf again?" "I don't want everyone to see my bald head," Quirrell led the way. "Sorry, Professor," Ron quickly apologized. "Although you're bald, I think you have an inner beauty, much better than Snape, who isn't bald. Thank you for the compliment." Weasley. The three walked down the corridor and soon entered a bright room. Countless glittering keys floated in the air like little birds. But the door was already open, and a key was stuck in the lock, trying to escape but forcibly trapped inside by magic. "Looks like we don't need to bother catching the key again." Quirrell pushed open the door, and the three entered the second room. The room was pitch black. They couldn't see anything. The moment they stepped inside, it suddenly burst into light, illuminating a shocking scene. The entire room was a giant wizard's chessboard. They had to become pieces and win the game to advance to the next room. Ron volunteered to play, and although he was captured, he helped Quirrell and Harry reach the final room. "Ron!" Harry cried out in anguish, standing by the door, looking at Ron unconscious on the chessboard. "Are you alright?" "I'm fine, Potter. He's just unconscious, not in any danger," Quirrell urged. "We have to hurry, or the Philosopher's Stone," urged on by Quirrell. Harry continued on, arriving at a new room where a monstrous creature lay on the floor, brutally murdered. They stepped over the monstrous creature's massive legs and headed for the next room, which contained only a table with 7 bottles of various shapes arranged on it. As soon as they crossed the threshold, 2 flames erupted behind them, one purple, one black, sealing both doors shut. Harry grabbed a roll of parchment next to the bottle and began to read it softly. He'd only read half before scratching his head, saying with a headache, "It's a logic puzzle, but I can't understand it at all. I can't deduce the answer." "Professor Quirrell, do you know how?" Quirrell simply shook his head. "No need. Snape's already inside, which means a lot of that potion will be consumed." Quirrell picked up the smallest bottle and shook it. "There's only a small portion of the potion left. Professor Snape didn't finish it. Let's each take a sip." Quirrell raised his wand, conjuring 2 small cups. He divided the last bit of potion in one cup and drank from it first. Harry took a deep breath, drank the potion, stepped into the black flames, and then smoothly made his way to the other side, entering the last room. There stood a wizard. It was Snape, 12,000 words, completed in 5 chapters. Exhausted, truly an exhausted ox. Chapter 95. The Basilisk. The dark, damp pipe system, with its winding, circuitous passages, led Rolf as if he had a clear route, heading in a predetermined direction. The hissing sounds echoing through the pipes acted as guiding lights, accurately pinpointing the basilisk's location. It spoke in a chilling voice, uttering chilling words: "Kill you, tear you apart, delicious snacks, finally, a feast." Hiss, tap, tap, tap. Footsteps followed one after another. Rolf made no attempt to conceal his arrival, pausing only before reaching a wall. He raised his wrist, where a small glass bottle hung. He flicked it lightly, producing a clear sound, before continuing his slow, deliberate steps into a large room. Inside stood many lifelike stone pillars of basilisks, their dark green shadows casting a dizzying light on the floor. A giant, entirely emerald green serpent slowly climbed up a pipe, seemingly preparing to leave the chamber. A single, bright red feather adorned its head. Rolf watched the basilisk's massive back and whistled, a sharp, piercing sound echoing in the empty room. "A wizard has come, a strange wizard, a delicious little treat delivered to our door." Hiss. The basilisk twisted its body and slid back into the chamber along the pipe, a terrifying swallowing sound emanating from its throat. It hissed happily to itself. "Is the wizard tasty? Juicy? Or crisp and delicious? I haven't had one in ages." Hiss. The basilisk's heavy body slid slowly across the dusty floor. It raised its enormous, vat-like head, blinking its lantern-like yellow pupils, searching for the wizard's location. Where did it hide? Our poor little treat. Let's see where it went. Hiss. Rolf leaned against a rock pillar, blocking the view of the basilisk's back, and whistled again. The basilisk twisted its body abruptly, only to be met with an incredibly dazzling white light that stung its eyes, forcing it to close them tightly, its face contorted in agony. We can't see that despicable wizard. He's just playing tricks." Hiss. Rolf, like a powerful radiant being, walked step by step towards the basilisk, gazing at the venomous, brilliant light. Suddenly, a ding sounded in his mind. One domesticated basilisk detected, triggering side quest 1, capture the basilisk, reward, magic, Death gaze. When using this spell, a large amount of magic power is concentrated in the eyes. Any magical creature that makes eye contact with you will die the instant their gaze meets. Note, petrifying gaze. When magic power is insufficient, eye contact is indirect, or there is a lack of strong killing intent. Death gaze degenerates into petrifying gaze, which only petrifies the enemy. Side quest 2. 100% taming of the basilisk. Reward, magic. Basilisk's hibernation. You can greatly extend your lifespan by hibernating, just like the basilisk. The basilisk's eyes were stung with excruciating pain, preventing it from opening them. However, it could tell from the footsteps that the boy was approaching. Suddenly, it raised its tail, twisting it in a huge arc, and lashed it in a certain direction. The powerful lash of its tail produced a resounding crash like a hammer striking steel. Rolf stared at the fierce attack, unmoved. He raised his arm, revealing a small glass bottle. Inside the bottle were a group of roosters that had taken shrinking potions. These roosters were the ones Rolf had recently asked Hagrid for, and Sherry had been keeping them in a box. He took out his wand, tapped the bottle, and whispered, loud voice. The roosters' faint cries instantly amplified 100-fold, their ear-piercing cries echoing throughout the entire underground space. Although the basilisk was powerful, it had a fatal weakness: the rooster's crow. Upon hearing the crowing, its eardrums ruptured, blood began to flow from its eyes, and it seemed to have been subjected to a terrible shock. Its entire body trembled violently in pain, its massive form swinging wildly, smashing stone pillars and sending fragments of rock flying. The basilisk was in excruciating pain, and it hissed and wailed, "Don't hurt us! Don't hurt us!" Hiss. "Make the rooster shut up, wizard. Please, please, submit to me, and I'll let you go," Rolf hissed back. The basilisk, oblivious to the shock of the wizard speaking parsley, thrashed about wildly, kicking up dust, almost pleading, "We are willing to submit to you, please. We remember the magic of Slytherin. We can grant you immortal glory, endless wealth, and teach you how to conquer death, to go further on the path to immortality." Hiss. Ralph tapped the bottle again with his wand. The rooster's crow ceased, and the basilisk groaned as it lay on the ground, panting heavily. "Thank you for your mercy. You are far more merciful than the heirs of Slytherin." Hiss. "You are truly a kind fellow. What has Voldemort been doing in the Chamber of Secrets?" Ralph asked. "I don't know what he's been secretly doing, but you should see for yourself." The basilisk's vision hadn't returned. It kept its eyes closed and crawled slowly and laboriously. Ralph asked a few more questions, which it answered honestly. Sensing that the boy seemed to have lowered his guard, the basilisk revealed a mocking, human-like smile, still inexperienced. It suddenly opened its gaping maw and lunged in a certain direction, a far cry from its previous dying, pathetic state. The basilisk's mouth was wide open, large enough to swallow Ralph whole, its 2 rows of venomous fangs gleaming coldly, dripping with venom like 2 steel blades. Ralph snapped his fingers expressionlessly, and vines hidden in the darkness whipped up large chunks of rock, swinging them swiftly and smashing them into the basilisk's head. He had followed Newt and witnessed many magical creatures, cunning, evil, or ferocious, and was quite experienced and battle-hardened. He wouldn't easily believe a basilisk's words, especially one that had lived for 900 years, with its fangs still intact, its eyes still unblemished, and whose fighting prowess remained formidable. The boulder crashed down on the hut with a deafening roar. Caught off guard, the basilisk swayed its head backward, its massive, upright body arching back slightly. The rooster crowed again. Having missed its chance, the basilisk struggled violently, then seemed to have truly fainted, lying on the ground twitching weakly. Ralph stepped on the basilisk's tail, moving forward along its spine, finally landing on its head. Holding the fairy's dagger, he plunged it into the basilisk's tightly closed eyes. Twice. Black blood gushed from the basilisk's blinded eyes, splattering Rob's face. The boy wiped the blood from his face, then reached out and touched the tuft of bright red feathers on the basilisk's head. It was quite cute. Rob whispered one last time, "Good boy, listen to me," adjusting my schedule, trying to fix the update time at 9 o'clock. Next chapter will be posted later. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96: Voldemort's Plan. Entering the last room in the Forbidden Zone, Harry saw Snape standing alone in front of the mirror, his breathing rapid. Harry screamed inwardly. He was right. Snape had stolen the Philosopher's Stone. He was right. But why didn't Professor McGonagall and Ralph trust him? Didn't they believe his keen intuition? Snape turned around, staring blankly at Harry. "Potter, what are you doing here? Your theft of the Philosopher's Stone has been exposed." "Stop, Snape, there are Aurors outside," Harry shouted, bluffing. "Aurors?" Snape's blank expression finally changed, turning to terror. Harry felt a surge of satisfaction. Snape usually looked at him with a mixture of mockery, disdain, and disgust. Now, caught red-handed, he could no longer maintain that hateful looking at an idiot expression. This change in mood made Harry feel good. What could be better than personally sending a hated teacher to Azkaban? At that moment, Harry felt confident of victory, especially when Professor Quirrell walked in. His confidence grew even stronger. Snape seemed to raise his wand, but Quirrell was faster. He raised his wand, and a rope appeared out of thin air, binding Snape tightly. Snape fell to the ground, his wand falling to the ground. Harry lunged forward, kicking the wand away, then punched Snape in the face, followed by 2 more kicks. "Helping the manhunt steal the Philosopher's Stone, you damned bastard, you despicable thing. Wizards who help the manhunt are all beasts," Harry cursed. "All right, Harry, stop cursing," Quirrell stammered, sounding somewhat uncomfortable. He whispered, "We'd better look for the Philosopher's Stone, lest Snape steals it." Hearing this, Harry quickly got up and searched the room for the Philosopher's Stone, but couldn't find it anywhere. He suddenly looked at the large mirror in the room and whispered, "Professor Quirrell, this is the mirror of Erased. I've heard Professor Dumbledore mention it. It can show what you're thinking." Harry thought quickly, and in a flash of inspiration, he exclaimed, "If I think about finding the Philosopher's Stone, and then look at the mirror, I can see myself finding it in the mirror. Wouldn't that tell me where the Philosopher's Stone is hidden?" Before Quirrell could answer, Harry walked to the mirror and saw a strange image in it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a dull, dark red stone. Just then, Harry felt something appear out of thin air in his pocket, heavy, like a stone. Harry rummaged in his pocket and exclaimed with great joy, "I found the Philosopher's Stone, Professor Quirrell." Quirrell stared at Harry in disbelief at the stone in his hand, swallowed hard, and said in a trembling voice, "Give it to me, Harry." Harry hesitated. "Give it to me, hurry." "Harry, it's not safe for you to hold it. I'm the professor," Quirrell urged. He strode over, extended his right hand, and Harry released his grip, the Philosopher's Stone falling into Quirrell's palm. Quirrell held up the Philosopher's Stone, staring at it with fascination, a look that frightened Harry. "Professor, what's wrong?" "Nothing, just happy." Quirrell withdrew his hand, laughing heartily. "Harry Potter, you've really helped me a lot, thank you." Quirrell suddenly stopped stuttering, his previous timid demeanor gone, replaced by radiant joy. "Professor Quirrell, you?" Harry stared at Quirrell's strange appearance, stammering, swallowing hard. "Shall we take the Philosopher's Stone to the headmaster's office now, child? What are you doing?" Quirrell smiled brightly. "Why would I return the Philosopher's Stone to Dumbledore?" Harry's heart leaped into his throat, his body, which had just relaxed slightly, tensed again, his heartstrings tightening even more. Under Harry's bewildered gaze, Quirrell spoke slowly and deliberately, his face contorted with rage. "I've been working hard to steal the Philosopher's Stone all along." Whether it was stealing it from Gringotts or letting trolls in on Halloween, Harry was struck dumb, all joy vanished, and he even felt a chill run down his spine. He asked incredulously, "Snape is your accomplice?" "Accomplice? Harry, you're so adorably stupid, I like you more and more." Quirrell couldn't help but laugh loudly. "Little wizards are likable because they're stupid, aren't they? Scamander is so annoying." The mocking smile on Quirrell's face slowly disappeared. He stared at Harry, his voice icy. "Snape is not my accomplice. He's always suspected me, threatened me. But he can't scare me at all. I have the Dark Lord as my backer." "That idiot, then what is Snape doing here?" Harry stared incredulously at Snape lying on the ground. Quirrell, like a victor, patiently explained softly, "Harry, he's not Snape, he's your friend Malfoy. I gave him Polyjuice Potion. That night, I fought with Snape and pulled some of his hair." "Hair? Hell, didn't expect that, did you?" "Snape didn't expect that either." "Why did you do that?" Harry exclaimed. "Why? It's all Scamander's fault." Quirrell's face suddenly contorted with rage. He growled, "He ran into me in Albania. He must have told Dumbledore, making the headmaster wary of me. Otherwise, why did so many students attack me and Dumbledore do nothing? I should have killed Scamander sooner. Quirrell narrowed his eyes, his killing intent palpable. Now that Dumbledore has become aware, Master has a new plan. He left my body, made me untie my scarf, so everyone would know I was normal. Then he pinned the blame for stealing the Philosopher's Stone on Snape, and you, Potter. You're the best witness. I'm a witness. Harry looked bewildered. Yes, Quirrell chuckled softly. Harry, it was you who gave me the inspiration. You're too nosy and self-righteous, always thinking Snape was trying to harm you, and you kept encouraging me. Harry swallowed hard, his face contorted with pain. Even if you hadn't come today, I would have found you, told you Snape was stealing the Philosopher's Stone, lured you to the Forbidden Zone, and let you witness Malfoy transformed into Snape appear here. You'd be the best witness to identify Snape. You're the boy who survived, and Snape has a criminal record. The Ministry of Magic would believe you. Quirrell grinned. That way, I can clear my name, avoid Dumbledore's suspicion, and steal the Philosopher's Stone again. No one will suspect a stuttering Quirrell, but I didn't expect you to come on your own, and even help me find the Philosopher's Stone. I'd been looking for it for ages. It's a double blessing, but I already know everything, Harry shouted. It's all right. Master's memory charm is very good. I can just modify your memories. Although there's a risk, there's a possibility that Dumbledore will discover the problem. Quirrell shook his head. But I already have the Philosopher's Stone. Aren't plans supposed to change at any time? Don't even think about it. Harry rushed towards Quirrell, but was tightly bound by a rope. Don't worry, Malfoy will die here soon. Lucius's son is dead, and he'll definitely force the Ministry of Magic to investigate. Quirrell grinned smugly. You'll be the only witness when you wake up, pointing the finger at Snape for killing Malfoy, or for stealing the Philosopher's Stone. No one will doubt you, Harry, and I'll continue to work as a professor at the school, and no one will suspect that stuttering Quirrell did all this. Quirrell opened his arms wide. Harry, cheer up. I'll be your defense against the dark arts professor again next year. We both have a bright future, thanks to book friend 1-609252126072338, Joker, and for their generous donations. Chapter 97 Where is my enormous serpent monster? Harry was ice cold, his hands trembling. He had wrongly accused Snape and given the Philosopher's Stone to Quirrell. It was practically a crime. Why hadn't he been more careful? Why hadn't he listened to Professor McGonagall and stayed at the Quidditch match instead of trying to deduce things and play the hero? Come on, let me alter your memories, Harry. When you wake up, you won't remember anything I said, only that Snape did it, Quirrell said contentedly. I'll mourn for him with you at school. Harry struggled to sit up. He had to do something. He widened his eyes and said, Professor McGonagall will soon find out I'm gone. I left a letter for Ralph, and they'll come and catch you, liar, Quirrell said dismissively. But even so, it doesn't matter. They should be too busy with their own problems right now. Why do you say that? The master summoned the basilisk from the Chamber of Secrets. Today, it will crawl out through the pipes and rush to the Quidditch pitch. It's the final match now, and many students are there, Quirrell grinned maliciously. Even if someone finds you're gone, even if they want to come and rescue you, they won't have time to worry about this place. And Dumbledore isn't at school either. The plan is foolproof, a perfect plan. Even Quirrell couldn't help but marvel at the Dark Lord's meticulousness. But just then, music suddenly filled the air. Quirrell whirled around, staring into the empty room. No one was there, but the music grew louder and louder. The sound was ethereal and mysterious, exhilarating to listen to. Flames suddenly erupted, and a deep red phoenix emerged from the flames, letting out a high-pitched cry. Fox, has Dumbledore returned? Quirrell exclaimed in surprise. Shouldn't he be in London? Fox flew straight towards Quirrell, pecking at his arm. His wand fell to the ground, kicked away by Harry, who was lying on the floor. Quirrell and Fox began to fight, but without his wand, he was no match for Fox. Quick, to the Chamber of Secrets, a cold voice came from the back of Quirrell's head, which he had rewrapped in his scarf. Master, aren't we going to carry out the plan? Quirrell asked, somewhat unwilling. Fox is here, and Dumbledore might be on his way, the voice said impatiently. We've already got the Philosopher's Stone, let's resurrect him first. As long as he could be resurrected, everything would be fine. Quirrell had no choice but to pick up Malfoy's fallen wand and run. Harry, bound to the ground, caught his breath. Fox didn't chase after him, but instead landed on Harry's shoulder and pecked at the ropes to untie him. Deep within the Chamber of Secrets, Ralph, carrying a black leather trunk, stood before a statue, gazing at its aged, monkey-like face, muttering, "Is this what Slytherins look like?" So ugly. Beneath the statue, the boy discovered two cauldrons. The potion in the left cauldron had a milky white sheen. The potion in the right cauldron resembled a viscous slurry, slowly bubbling. Ralph immediately recognized the potion on the right, especially the viscous slurry. It was clearly Polyjuice potion, only without the added hair. Ralph was excited. Polyjuice potion was difficult to brew, and such a large cauldron of it wouldn't be cheap. He hadn't expected to stumble upon such a good thing during his visit to the Chamber of Secrets. But Voldemort had been hiding in the Chamber of Secrets for so long. Brewing Polyjuice potion here, who did he want to become? Ralph squinted and pondered for a moment. He suddenly remembered that night in the school hospital corridor, Quirrell had grabbed Snape, wrestled with him, and even pulled a tuft of hair. Ralph had found it strange then. When had Quirrell become so brave? Now it seemed he was doing it on purpose, taking the opportunity to steal Professor Snape's hair and transform into his likeness. He really went all out. The taste of Polyjuice potion was related to the hair's owner, and a Polyjuice potion made from Snape's hair probably wouldn't taste good. As for the potion on the left, Ralph hadn't seen it before, but it was likely the elixir of immortality. After all, Voldemort had spent so much time stealing the Philosopher's Stone to brew the elixir. He just didn't know if Voldemort had stolen the Philosopher's Stone. Ralph looked at the two cauldrons. Since he was already here, wouldn't it be impolite not to take something with him? Ralph quickly cleaned the Chamber of Secrets, moving everything he could carry into boxes, even the two emeralds embedded in the wall near the door. He checked everything to make sure he hadn't forgotten anything, then prepared to leave, satisfied. But before he even stepped out of the Chamber of Secrets, he saw a figure rushing towards him. Quirrell hadn't expected to see anyone else here, especially not Scamander. He stood there stunned for several seconds. The scene became incredibly awkward. "Professor Quirrell, hello there. Did you go to the Quidditch final?" Ralph greeted him, clutching his black suitcase. "No, what are you doing here?" Quirrell had just lied to Harry, and he wanted to use the same trick on Ralph again. "You'd better be careful. I'm following Snape. He's trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone." "I'm following Snape too," Ralph smiled. "Professor Quirrell, I know you're a good man. Let's catch Snape together and get the Special Merlin Medal and the school's Special Contribution Award." "Fool, he's lying to you." A cold voice came from Quirrell's body, high-pitched and ruthless. "Stop talking nonsense, kill him." Quirrell had no choice but to raise his wand and shout, "Avada Kedavra." Ralph wouldn't give Quirrell a chance. Upon hearing Voldemort's voice, he immediately retreated and hid behind a rock pillar. The green light arrived late, striking the rock pillar and causing it to shatter into countless fragments, kicking up a little dust. Since Ralph had come to the Chamber of Secrets, he had naturally prepared for being trapped inside. He knocked on a box, and a bird with fluffy feathers emerged. This was a dart bird. They could apparate, disappearing into thin air and reappearing in another place. Like house elves, the ballbird and phoenix can apparate within Hogwarts Castle because their magic differs from wizards. They are not bound by the anti-apparate charms here. Ralph, holding the clumsy ballbird, urged, "Hurry up." The ballbird vanished with a pop, and Quirrell chased after it, only to find it gone from behind the rock pillar. "Go check the cauldron, my elixir of immortality," Voldemort roared, "and here on the ground, why is there so much blood? Where's my basilisk?" Ralph, carrying the box and holding the ballbird, kept gurgling and blowing bubbles. He knew the ballbird wasn't very intelligent, couldn't understand wizards, and liked to apparate randomly, but it shouldn't be this bad. Taking him to the bottom of the Black Lake, right? Ralph was about to lose his breath. A group of mermaids wielding forks were charging towards him from a distance. The lead mermaid, with a pointed snout and a monkey-like face, shouted, "Quickly, grab him. This is the wizard who just spied on the chieftain's wife while she was bathing." Third update. I only wrote 6,000 words today, so this is an extra update. I'm a useless person, humble. To be continued tomorrow. Chapter 98. Will Dumbledore mourn for you? Splash, soaked to the bone, Ralph once again apparated away with a harpy. The boy had to leave, there were just too many merfolk swarming around. He hadn't actually peeked at the chieftain's wife bathing. That monkey-faced, thunder-god-like merfolk had been calling her sister-in-law incessantly. Ralph looked up and found himself in a familiar place. especially seeing the Slytherin statue, built during the reign of Duncan I of Scotland, with its bronze base and granite. The sense of familiarity was overwhelming. Damn it. Ralph found himself back in the Chamber of Secrets. Couldn't this harpy apparition be a little more reliable with its random apparition? Voldemort was still directing Quirrell to find the cauldron containing the elixir of immortality when he looked up and saw the boy was back. Provocation, a serious provocation. Voldemort had never suffered such contempt and insult. What? He was beaten up recently? It was Quirrell who was hit on the back of the head. What did that have to do with Voldemort? Ralph didn't leave immediately, fearing he'd be transported back to the bottom of the Black Lake and encounter the mermaids again. Voldemort didn't seem inclined to attack either. Suddenly, he called out, "Scamander, the Dark Lord, want to speak with you face to face." Ralph hid behind a rock pillar to avoid being ambushed. He called out, "What do you want to talk about?" Quirrell turned around, revealing the back of his face. His face was deathly pale, his red eyes glowed, and he had two long, thin nostrils like snakes. Voldemort whispered, "This is our first meeting, isn't it? I've actually met your grandfather, Newt Scamander." Voldemort seemed to be reminiscing, his voice hoarse as he chuckled. "I was very young then. He came to Hogwarts and taught a few lessons on the protection of magical creatures, and I was immediately captivated. I greatly admired his extensive knowledge of magical creatures." Ralph was a little annoyed. Why was he trying to establish a connection? Was Voldemort going to say something like, "Malfoy, Scamander, we're actually related, aren't we? Or perhaps, I'm actually a fan of Newt." Fortunately, the Dark Lord maintained his composure. He changed the subject. "I've always admired the Scamander family. You're a pure-blood wizard, aren't you, child? You're of noble birth and exceptionally talented. Why don't you serve me? I need someone like you, a subordinate." Voldemort had intended to say servant, but the words caught in his throat, and he quickly replaced it with a more euphemistic term. The Forbidden Zone and the Philosopher's Stone were both schemes orchestrated by Dumbledore. The headmaster should never have left Hogwarts. Ralph was waiting for Dumbledore to clean up the mess, so he deliberately stalled, replying, "In your current state, where you can only hide behind Quirrell's head, are you sure you can recruit me? Then you should follow me even more." Voldemort laughed. "Death will come, perhaps today, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps a month, perhaps next year, but death will never leave you, drawing ever closer, and I, the great Dark Lord, even under the killing curse, have not died. I have proven my immortality. I have gone further on the path to eternal life than anyone else." Voldemort's voice was hoarse as he seduced him. "You may have heard of my infamous reputation from Dumbledore, but it's all slander. Shameless slander, child. I am not a wicked wizard, but rather very merciful." Voldemort's voice softened considerably. He used the same methods he had employed in his youth to deal with the witches, patiently persuading him, "I am willing to share the secrets of death with my followers. Scamander, if you join the Death Eaters now, I will grant you immense power and endless riches. Child, return the potion to me, I know it is with you. After I am resurrected, grovel at my feet, listen to my teachings. I will teach you how to live forever. Come." In the dim light, Voldemort's lips curled into a smile. He stretched out his hand, as if waiting for a pitiful lamb to turn back from its wayward path. "So you've got the Philosopher's Stone?" Ralph frowned. "Easy." Voldemort pulled the dull stone from his pocket and smiled. "The Dark Lord can do anything, if he wants to. Dumbledore can't stop him, but I really don't have the potion you want." Ralph spread his hands. "If you'd like to lend me the Philosopher's Stone, I can help you find the potion." "Very well." Voldemort's voice was filled with anger. "If this is your choice, Scamander, then I can only say I'm sorry. Kill him," he suddenly screamed. Quirrell turned and raised his wand, but a sharp bird cry had already filled the air, a mournful wail that filled Quirrell with nausea and fear. He quickly waved his wand, casting an earplugs spell on himself, so that only a buzzing sound blocked out the harbinger of death's cry. But the brief pause had already cost Quirrell the initiative. Several black vines had somehow wrapped around his ankles, suspending him abruptly in midair. The black vines, like snakes, clung to Quirrell's body, constricting him until he couldn't speak or cast spells. The demonic net lashed at him like a whip, a series of thunderous cracks echoing through the chamber. Another boulder, entangled in vines, slammed into his head. Quirrell, his head severely injured, crashed onto the stone floor like a broken kite, blood trickling from his mouth, his face ashen. Quirrell braced himself against the ground with his elbows, his head throbbing with excruciating pain, but more vines clung to him, forcing him to desperately try to retreat. The relentless onslaught overwhelmed Quirrell. Voldemort roared, "Useless trash. I'll take control of your body." Quirrell closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, his gaze was incredibly sharp. Voldemort cast a spell without his staff, his blood transforming into a black mist. The moment the vines that wrapped around him touched the mist, they blazed and hissed. Voldemort waved his arm, and a fiery python, its body wreathed in flames, appeared in the air, spinning rapidly around him and burning away the vines. The Devil's Web feared fire. This was a fatal weakness against wizards. Without the vines' attack, Voldemort stood up, raised his wand, his face contorted with rage, and unleashed a silvery white beam that sliced through the air like a knife through tofu, hurtling towards the distance. A brilliant white light exploded, illuminating the entire chamber as if it were daytime. The shockwave spread wildly, forcing Ralph to retreat to avoid the impact. Fortunately, the room contained countless rock pillars that served as cover, and Ralph moved with remarkable agility. He was like a slippery eel, unable to mount an effective attack and forced to passively take hits, yet the Dark Lord's spells couldn't touch him at all. Voldemort grew impatient. He raised his wand, and a ball of black flame erupted, landing on the ground. The demonic flame burned fiercely, quickly coalescing into a black serpent as thick as a bowl. It extended its enormous head, its eyes as black as ink. The serpent coiled around a rock pillar, its body hanging downwards, its head flicking out a hissing tongue at Ralph, as if in defiance and warning. Voldemort raised his wand high, and the flames instantly grew several meters long, swirling and dancing above the chamber, sending waves of heat crashing down. From the suspended fire serpent, drops of black flame flowed down, each drop suddenly growing larger in midair, transforming into the shape of a magical creature. After more than a dozen, the flames landed and shot off into the distance. "If you won't resurrect me, then you all must die." The flames of the fiend fire curse can continuously devour and grow stronger. It will eventually destroy Hogwarts. Voldemort stood in the flames, like a demon god. He raised his head and let out a beastly roar that pierced the eardrums, finally laughing loudly. "Scamander, do you think Dumbledore will mourn for you when you die? Thanks to Inwa, and for their generous donations." Chapter 99. So this is the magic stone? Perched on the shoulder of the Slytherin statue, Ralph gazed at the demonic flames in the distance, devouring everything in their path and spreading towards them. He couldn't help but sigh. Why start a fire when there's no reason to fight? Ralph patted the statue at his feet. It was an antique nearly 1,000 years old, and it seemed it was beyond saving. Ralph was also holding a bluebird in his arms, which was making frightened doo-doo-doo sounds. The boy rubbed its head and instructed, "Little guy, be reliable this time, don't approach to the Black Lake again." Just as Ralph was about to leave, a ball of flame suddenly appeared in midair, and a red bird emerged. "Fox!" Ralph exclaimed excitedly. "Great, with Fox's apparate ability, who needed a ballbird?" Ralph immediately tossed the unreliable little guy back into the box. That's how ruthless he was. Fox landed on Ralph's shoulder, its golden claws hooking onto his clothes, seemingly preparing to take him away from the Chamber of Secrets. Wait, the Philosopher's Stone is still in Voldemort's hands. Ralph noticed Fox had arrived and suddenly didn't want to leave anymore. Voldemort was powerful, but he controlled Quirrell's body. His power ceiling was only Quirrell's, far inferior to Voldemort himself. If Quirrell was eliminated, Voldemort would be useless. Ralph quickly thought for a moment, then looked at Fox and said seriously, "Fox, I'll use invisibility to make myself invisible, then you can send me to Quirrell's side. If Voldemort doesn't notice me, then it's fine. If he does, you draw his fire and use your body to block one of his spells for me." "Just block one, I know you can, Fox." The old phoenix stared intently at Ralph. It could indeed block, but based on its understanding of Voldemort, his first move would be Avada Kedavra, and it expected him to block that? "Scamander, are you even human? Help me block it, you won't die anyway, and you can be reborn early to feel the firepower of youthful flesh." Ralph stroked Fox's tail feathers and negotiated, "After this, I'll cook you something delicious, for free." The demonic flames surged forward, leaving a circular clearing around Voldemort. He stared at the swallowed chamber, feeling a pang of regret. This was his secret place at Hogwarts, and he never imagined he would destroy it with his own hands. But fortunately, he had obtained the Philosopher's Stone. Leaving Hogwarts, he could soon brew the elixir of immortality and be resurrected. Voldemort seemed to already see that wonderful scene, He would reconstruct his body, summon the Death Eaters, and those loyal servants would kneel at his feet, kissing his toes and accepting his rewards. And those who betrayed him would be tortured to death one by one, and finally devoured by Nagini. What a wonderful scene. Voldemort couldn't help but laugh, but his smile suddenly froze. He turned abruptly and saw a ball of flame ignite, and a phoenix appeared out of thin air behind him. Dumbledore, Voldemort cried, but he didn't see Dumbledore, only a phoenix. Voldemort frowned, still holding his wand, and said mercilessly, Avada Kedavra. A flash of green light disappeared, and Fawkes opened his mouth wide, swallowing the green light whole. It burst into flames and collapsed to the floor. Wait, there's someone else. Voldemort had already reacted, but a boy had already circled behind him, his figure appearing. Voldemort reacted with lightning speed, casting a protective spell on himself. But Ralph didn't raise his wand, he didn't even make any extra movements. He simply exchanged a glance with Quirrell, his eyes filled with a large amount of magic. Petrifying gaze, Quirrell stared into Ralph's eyes, his gaze instantly becoming blank, his vision gradually blurring, and his whole body began to stiffen, like a frozen corpse. Die, Voldemort roared, only to find to his horror that Quirrell's body was no longer under his control, completely frozen in place, then falling straight to the ground like a freshly made specimen. Ralph walked over, staring at the hideous, horrifying face on the back of Quirrell's head, especially his bloodshot eyes, which were fixed on the boy. Ralph suddenly raised his foot and stomped on Voldemort's face, twisting his toe sharply. The face beneath the boy's foot emitted a series of soft hissing sounds, not from pain, but from rage. A goblin dagger appeared in Ralph's hand. His blue eyes were fixed on Voldemort's face bearing the footprint. His expression was calm as he grinned and chuckled softly. All right, die. The dagger severed Quirrell's head. Ralph kicked the entire skull like a quake ball, sending it hurtling towards the demonic flames. Quirrell, now decapitated, revealed a bloody, mangled neck, a gruesome sight. Ralph pulled the now dull Philosopher's Stone from Quirrell's pocket and weighed it. It was heavy. Voldemort, like a ghost, emerged from the back of Quirrell's head, letting out a pitiful howl in the flames. Scamander. At the Quidditch pitch, Harry rushed in, shouting, Run! Run! The basilisk is coming out. Voldemort, Quirk, he's about to attack, you all need to get out of here, Harry yelled. Quirk has taken the Philosopher's Stone. Voldemort is going to resurrect. All the students stared at the crazed Harry as if he were a madman, and the pitch erupted in chaos. Professor McGonagall, Quirrell has already stolen the Philosopher's Stone, believe me, get everyone out of here. Just then, everyone looked towards the center of the pitch, gasping in shock. A figure covered in blood had suddenly appeared on the grass. Ralph sat on the grass, carrying a box, and cradling the bald fox and a bird of prey in his arms. He wiped the sweat from his brow. The ball escaper had finally been more reliable this time. Sherry and Hermione were watching the game from the Ravenclaw stands when Ralph suddenly appeared. They jumped up and rushed over, but countless students surged into the aisles, pushing their way onto the lawn to see what was happening. Being high up in the stands, they couldn't get through. Sherry pulled a handkerchief from her pocket, took out her wand, chanted a spell, and tapped it lightly. The handkerchief instantly transformed into a large cushion. Standing at the edge of the railing, Sherry threw the cushion to the ground. The girl vaulted over the railing and jumped from the 3-meter-high stand, landing on the thick cushion, her knees bent, rolling to absorb some of the impact. Hermione, standing in the stands, stared in disbelief at Sherry. Gritting her teeth, she closed her eyes and jumped after her. Sherry, her ponytail swinging, ran towards the field. Ralph sat on the ground, watching a quaffle hurtling towards him. He pulled out his wand, conjured a stick, and lashed it out. The ball arced beautifully before slamming into the Slytherin basket. In the commentary box, Lee shouted, "Good shot. Hufflepuff gets 10 points." Chapter 100 My system is a magical talent? In the school hospital, Ralph lay on a hospital bed, undergoing a thorough full-body examination by Madame Pomfrey. "You're lucky you encountered a dark wizard but weren't injured. Can I go home tonight?" Ralph asked expectantly. "No," Madame Pomfrey said coldly, "you still need further observation. You weren't injured, were you? Observe your brain." Madame Pomfrey glared. "Quirrell is a dark wizard, and you still went after him? What else could it be but a problem with your brain? Just watch Quidditch in the arena. Why all this trouble?" "Of course, the one who needs his brain treated is Dumbledore," Madame Pomfrey sneered. "Hiring a dark wizard as a teacher, I think he's senile." If not, let Minerva be the headmistress. At least she wouldn't let some shady characters into the school, Madame Pomfrey muttered under her breath. She even promised to give me an elective course in medical care when she becomes headmistress. Professor McGonagall, is this how you win people over? You're something else. Madame Pomfrey continued her sharp commentary, and Ralph, upon hearing it, even considered anonymously submitting an article to the Daily Prophet with the title, Pomfrey angrily denounces Dumbledore's 10 deadly sins, says he's not even 1/1000th as good as McGonagall. You'll stay in the hospital these next few days. I'll keep a close eye on you and make sure you don't wander off. Madame Pomfrey took out a large bar of chocolate, smashed it with a small hammer, and placed it in a bowl. Eat this chocolate. Can I let anyone visit me? Ralph looked at the large bar of chocolate, his face full of worry. My friends don't know my situation and might be very anxious. No, Dumbledore doesn't allow anyone to disturb you right now. Madame Pomfrey thought for a moment, then softened her tone. But if you want to say something, I can help you convey it. All right, I'll write a few letters. Please send them out for me. I also have 7 pet treatment appointments. Please postpone them for me. And please follow up on the 3 orders in Diagon Alley. Madame Pomfrey turned and left, then examined Harry again. Harry was fine, just a little agitated, his hands trembling uncontrollably, as if he had Parkinson's. Rolf, what happened? Harry leaned over the bed, craning his neck to ask, did you see Quirrell and Voldemort? And the Philosopher's Stone? Madame Pomfrey, who was almost out of the room, saw Harry's agitation and returned, giving him a bottle of tranquilizer and sleeping pills. After drinking them, Harry slumped onto the bed and quickly fell asleep. Madame Pomfrey gave Rolf a deep look. Rolf immediately quieted down, pulling the covers over himself. Madame Pomfrey returned to her office, satisfied. But not long after, a commotion arose at the door. Rolf listened intently. It seemed someone was trying to enter but being stopped by Madame Pomfrey. After a brief argument, Dumbledore entered. Looking at Ralph lying on the bed, he smiled and said, it wasn't easy getting past Madame Pomfrey. I've suggested she become the Quidditch goalkeeper more than once. She has a real talent for stopping people. The headmaster sat down in a chair and smiled. Ralph, many students want to come and see you, to bring you gifts, especially many witches. If it weren't for Madame Pomfrey, your bedside would be piled high with things by now. Dumbledore blinked and smiled. Everything you did in the Chamber of Secrets, your confrontation with Quirrell, and the news of protecting the Philosopher's Stone have spread far and wide, and the Devil's Flame in the Chamber of Secrets, I arrived in time and extinguished it, Dumbledore said. No one died, right? Ralph asked. Besides Quirrell, who was consumed by his fiend fire curse, the most seriously injured was probably Draco Malfoy, Dumbledore said calmly. He's not seriously injured, but after taking Polyjuice potion containing Snape's hair, he vomited for a long time in the bathroom after waking up. Lucius Malfoy seems to have little faith in Madame Pomfrey's medical skills and sent his son to St. Mungo's Hospital for Magic and Wizardry, Dumbledore said calmly. Lucius Malfoy also thought I was unfit to be headmaster and wrote several letters using abusive language towards me, my parents, and my surname. Dumbledore quickly recounted what had happened in the Forbidden Zone, then crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair, saying, Rolf, tell me your story. I'd love to know how you found the Chamber of Secrets. Dumbledore had searched for a long time without finding it, otherwise, he wouldn't have expelled Hagrid 50 years ago. But he hadn't expected Rolf to find it and even stop Voldemort and the Basilisk. Harry was entirely within his expectations and plans, but Ralph's actions completely exceeded his imagination and caught him off guard. I guessed it, Ralph said, head bowed, reciting his prepared explanation. One day I was walking down a corridor when I suddenly heard voices coming from inside the walls. It was Parsleyan, screaming about killing. Parsleyan? Dumbledore asked curiously. Ralph, are you a Parsleyan? I wasn't born a Parsleyan, Professor. Ralph shook his head. I think you should have heard my grandfather mention my special talent. Nit mentioned it many times. He said you have the ability to communicate with magical creatures and learn their special magic, Dumbledore said softly. It was because of this talent that he decided to allow Ralph to bring his suitcase to Hogwarts instead of sending him to Ivermorny. Yes, Ralph took out a seed, placed it in his palm, and the seed quickly sprouted. This is the Botricle's magic, capable of bringing plants to life. I learned it from the Botricle. Do you understand? A very peculiar talent. Ralph, but not entirely incomprehensible. Dumbledore smiled slightly. You know, some wizards are like that, born with very peculiar powers. a natural legilimency, parcel twang, disguise magus, a prophetic eye. These are spells that ordinary wizards cannot learn later in life. Some are born with them. Our Dumbledore family also has. Dumbledore seemed lost in thought, and he said slowly, I have a special affinity with those powerful birds. There's a story in our family that whenever any Dumbledore is in dire need, a phoenix will fly to him. My great-grandfather had a phoenix, but it flew away after his death and never returned, and I also have one. Fox, Ralph was somewhat shocked. Such a thing was actually possible. I have a. Dumbledore paused, seemingly considering his words, before continuing. A close friend once said, magic only blossoms in a very few souls, and in these few souls, even more special, innate magical talents will awaken. Dumbledore sighed. This talent is inexplicable. It can only be considered a power inherited in one's bloodline. That's why the pure blood ideology is so popular. They firmly believe that if pure blood wizards intermarry, that special talent will be passed down and not diluted. Rolf, you clearly also possess some kind of special talent. Dumbledore squinted at the sprouting seed and said softly, however, this isn't my area of expertise. Nico is more knowledgeable in this area. He's studied it for centuries. You can ask him if you have the chance. Rolf breathed a sigh of relief. As long as he could explain it and someone believed him, that was good enough. Who said a system wasn't a magical talent? Chapter 3 delivered. 6,000 words completed for today. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.